All right. It is 2:06 and it is Tuesday, April 25th. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees. Clerk Rodriguez, will you please do roll call?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Trustee Mayberry.
I'm here.
Vice President Nicolette.
Present.
I am here. President Smith.
Present.
Trustee Westlake.
Here.
Trustee Woodley.
Here.
Trustee Church.
Here.
And student representative is not present as of yet. Madam President, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. And I do know that Ivy will be joining us in just a little bit. So when she does join, JJ, please let me know so that we can formally welcome her. Oh, that's even better. Wonderful. All right. Okay, so today's Pledge of Allegiance, we will be led by someone whose counsel I appreciate, whose ethics, integrity, and service is something that I personally look up to and appreciate, and that is Clerk Joe Rodriguez. Thank you. All right, that closes out section 1, our opening items. Is it me or is my mic louder than it usually is? Oh, maybe not. Okay, I'm wired for sound. We'll go ahead and we'll move on to section 2. These are our consent agenda items. I do know that we have a request to pull items 2.09 to 2.12. So we will be pulling those items. We will be pulling them as a group, and that will allow this body to discuss all of them together. They share a theme. We still will take individual motions on them or a blanket motion that individually has all of them listed, all right? So just because we're pulling it does not mean that we cannot make individual decisions should this body choose. Are there any clarifying questions on the remaining items before we take public comment? And just so everyone knows, we are taking public comment on items 2.02 through 2.08 and then 2.13 to 2.21.
I have no public comment.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve. Madam Chairperson.
I think we need, that was a record, but I still think we need a Trustee Mayberry to actually read out the motion.
I move to approve the consent items noted that you just identified. If you want to give me those again, please, I'm happy to.
Which are items 2.02 to 2.08.
Thank you, Vice President. 2.09 through 2.12.
No.
Is that right?
No. Okay.
No,
I'll tee it up. I'm looking for a motion to approve consent agenda items 2.02 through 2.08 and also 2.13 through 2.21.
So moved.
Boom. Seconded by Clerk Rodriguez. Motion made by Trustee Mayberry. All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carries. So now we will pull items 2.09 and 2.12 together in a group. And we welcome Andrea Sullivan and Tammy Zimmerman from our purchasing departments and facilities. Thank you.
Tammy Zimmerman, Chief Facilities Management Officer. We welcome any questions, but these are, so I'll go specifically kind of through them a little bit. There are 2 mobiles at Bohatch to relieve overcrowding to allow students in there. There's 1 mobile at Sky Ranch to relieve overcrowding so that we have room for students. The same with North Valleys. The Mount Rose is a demo and replace because the existing mobile is dry. It doesn't have a restroom in it, and it needs some upgrades to it. So it makes sense to replace it with a new one that has restrooms and is in better condition. So I welcome any questions you guys might have.
Very good. So I did see a light on, but the trustee who pulled this originally was Trustee Westlake, and so I'd like to invite her to go first.
Thank you very much. So this is in no way me trying to say that the schools in my area have more needs than other schools. And it is in no way casting blame on anyone, because I understand that no one has a crystal ball and some things are unavoidable. But this does seem very tragic to me. I added up the cost of moving these modules, and it's almost $1.5 million. And we're not getting anything for our money. We are servicing our kids, but I would like to try and see if there's some way around this. I understand the difficulty with rezoning and the time and all of that, but if there's any means possible not to spend $1.5 million, which is not moving us ahead on making things better at our schools. And I'm going to just give a brief laundry list. I'm sure others have the same issues, but just so we can get in context what that $1.5 million can do. At Bud Beasley, they have swamp coolers. I believe they're the only school in the district that does not have AC. At Sepulveda, they have 4 active boards that are over 10 years old and no others. I believe they're the only school in the district that doesn't have an active board in every classroom. At Reed High School, my youngest son is 29 years old. They lost the opportunity to host the game playing Liberty to see who would go on to state because Liberty refused to play on that field. It's so dangerous. There's officials that refuse to officiate. They want off the schedule when it's at Reed. And that to put down turf at Reed, it's $1.2 million. So you can kind of see moving modules that maybe we could have had a opportunity to head off the situation and use that 1.2. The dugouts at Sparks High School are atrocious. The scoreboard's been hit by lightning. It doesn't even work, doesn't keep score accurately. And I want everyone to think, please, what creates the most school spirit? What generates funds in a high school? It's athletics. So if we...
Trustee, before we get, so I totally understand and I hear you and I agree that the conversation is this is an amount of money, these are other things we could use, and I'm feeling you with that. Before we get too far down the advocacy for line item projects, just because like you were onto something about asking about zoning. I mean, the way that we avoid having to move modules
Right.
and addressing crowding. So
Right.
could we maybe go back to
Absolutely.
that? Okay, great.
Absolutely. And I apologize. I just wanted to visualize the dollar amount. But can't we put our heads together and think of some other means to do this? There's, 40 days of school left? And I know that we probably wouldn't even be able to really fix this through zoning before next school year. And I understand that there's a lot of hoops and bells and whistles and paperwork, but can't we think of something else other than spending $1.5 million on moving buildings? I don't think it's fiscally responsible. I just do not think it is fiscally responsible. And I honestly don't think taxpayers would think it's fiscally responsible. Thank you.
I do want to give them the opportunity to respond. The question that I heard among the statement was, will we be looking at zoning changes so that we can address the attendance variability that's happening in these regions?
So we are intending to go to the zoning committee for the Spanish Springs middle schools to alleviate Sky Ranch and that in the next school year to be effective for the following school year. We just need to bridge that gap for this one, right? We also have talked about Stonebrook Elementary School and zoning of those elementary schools out there to alleviate Bow Hatch. Mount Rose is an existing portable that we're just replacing because of that. And then through the FMP project, we're looking at North Valleys, and we're going to have a community meeting here May 8th to discuss those options, and we are looking at those options. So we're not trying to be short-sighted here. We're trying to look at everything and anything, but we're also trying to make sure that our students have seats to be in at the beginning of school year.
Thank you very much. Trustee Westlake, does that kind of capture some of the questions that you had around zoning? It does not presume how you're going to vote one way or the other, but what it is that they're looking at in terms of the Zoning Advisory Committee and other things.
Thank you, President Smith. It does answer the question around zoning, and I was educated when I was talking with you about this. I just think we can come up with something. I just feel we can come up with something that's not going to cost $1.5 million. I just really do. I mean, I have a lot of faith in the knowledge base that we have in the district, and this just doesn't seem like a fix that we should be footing the bill for. I think we could come up with something else. Thank you.
Clerk Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President. And Trustee Westlake, I do appreciate your passion. I will say this, though. I wouldn't be doing my job as a trustee representing District C if I didn't say this, that Spanish Springs Waynefield area is growing crazy fast. And the City of Sparks, when these schools were built, City of Sparks approved the development that are going up out there. So I know there's a lot of apartments being built there. I know there's a lot of homes being built out there. And I know Mr. Searcy, I've been holding his feet to the fire quite a bit with many more stuff out there. So I do know, having been to those schools and hearing the stress and the honestly upset parents, there's not enough seats in those schools, that they do need these modulars. And it's definitely a temporary, it's a Band-Aid on gushing language out there. So I definitely believe that we owe it to our taxpayers to give their kids a seat to sit out there.
Very, very good. Thank you. Any other clarifying questions? Because we are going to go to public comment for these items, which is 2.09 to 2.12.
I have no public comment for these items.
Thanks. I'll say that, Trustee Westlake, you bring up some really good points. You really, really do. And I'm glad that staff is acknowledging other actions that we can be taking so that we can avoid having brand new schools that have modules out in front of them, which is not something that, I personally enjoy whatsoever. With that said, I'm going to vote yes for it because functionally they have to move. A company has to do this, and these kids need a place to sit. But it is absolutely not in opposition of the very valid points that you brought up. Okay, so I do want to clarify that. And I appreciate your advocacy on this and for raising these things, because these are good questions and these are good conversations. So thank you. So with that said, I would entertain a motion depending on how this body would like to move on this item. Unless there's additional conversation.
Madam President, can we approve all of them or just
Yep,
the one?
you just have to say them like I approve 2.09, 10, 11, and 12.
I'd like to entertain a motion then. I move that the Board of Trustees approves consent agenda items 2.09 through 2.12.
Second.
All right, so moved by Clerk Rodriguez. I'll give the second to Trustee Woodley, who just beat you out by Vice President Nicolette. Is there any discussion on the motion? No, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Thank you so much. So that's a motion of 6-1. And thank you for that conversation. And thank you so much, Ms. Zimmerman and Ms. Sullivan. All right, that closes out our second section for consent agenda items, and we will move on to section 3, our legislative items. This is a very exciting one. So we'll go ahead and we will open item 3.01. This is the presentation and discussion to update the Board of Trustees on the 2023 Nevada legislative session based on the approved 2023 Washoe County School District legislative platform, as well as updates to the Washoe County School District's legislation, Senate Bill SB 56. This is an item for presentation and discussion only. And we have a great lineup here. We have Dr. Keogh. Dr. Keogh here? No? Okay. Well, we also have Dylan Shaver, our principal at Pinion Public Affairs. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the board, for having me here today. Dylan Shaver, Pinion Public Affairs, just here to give you a little update of the way things are going in Carson City right now. Today is April 25th. It's an important day in the legislative process. It is the first House passage deadline, so assembly bills, barring some sort of special rule, assembly bills barring some special rule have to be voted out of the assembly today. Senate bills have to be voted out of the Senate today. If they don't, we'll play taps and move on to the next deadline day. If just using the assembly for example, bill will pass there. They will have to transmit to the other house and go through the whole thing over again, but with less time. So if I am talking real fast, it's because we have a lot of things up in the air back there today, and I'm going to get back to the office as soon as I am through with you. I always like to put a thoughtful piece of artwork up for you, and this picture was taken after the superintendent and President Smith presented to the joint committees on Ways and Means and Finance in the Assembly and Senate. They were basically rock stars. There was literally a line of people waiting to have their pictures taken. Assemblywoman Anderson was we were able to peel her away and get this shot in just so I could use it on this slide. And just assume I told some sort of funny joke right before. I was surprised, and you pulled it off very well. Everything we do in Carson City is informed by a platform that you developed and passed in conjunction with your leadership here at the district. Our contribution was putting it in a prettier layout than it was normally presented to the legislature, but the contents originated from thoughts and ideas you have. This informs our sort of on-the-ground decision about specific bills. If a bill doesn't fall within the strict confines of the platform, we bounce it back to the superintendent and her leadership team to kind of see where the district's priorities are going to lie. We have a process for engaging here. I know it's been a little bit of a shift for WCSD to move from an in-house system to an outside lobbyist, but I just wanted to give you a sense that it turns out we do have a little bit of a procedure here. A measure, an idea is introduced. The first thing we do is we send it to the appropriate staff for their review and feedback. We take those comments, filter those comments through step 3, which is the platform that you passed, and then we sort of come up with a strategy there and engage with the right personnel within the district to sort of figure out the game plan and then transmit whatever that game plan is, if it's an opinion-only thing, if we're relying on staff or what have you, to the legislators themselves. Informing this activity is some sort of strategies that we worked on with your team, and I have taken great pride in trying to portray the Washoe County School District as a decaffeinated version of other school districts in the state right now, where our goal here, I think we are all in the same place. We just want to do what's right for these students and their families, and we are not bringing with us the I would say, drama that other districts might be right now. We are focused, and this is sort of a principle that I brought from my time at the city of Reno. Nothing would frustrate me more than seeing sort of our lobbyists sitting with 7 other municipal lobbyists all waiting to say the exact same thing into the record. We don't do that as WCSD. Like I said, we funnel everything through the framework I showed you on the previous slide and to determine what is most important to this district and do what we can do on an outcome focused basis. Part of that means collaborating with our colleagues in this space, right? We are not the only educational actor right now. There are 16 other school districts, and so we'll coordinate with them and with the Association of School Boards and the Association of School Superintendents to make sure that the coverage is still happening, and that allows us to really focus on things that are going to be operationally important to this school district. And finally, once we have found out what that is, we are a professional group, and our role is to be a professional resource for the legislature in a way that will ultimately achieve the agenda outlined in your platform. So this can take a lot of different forms, and I will touch on them throughout the rest of the presentation, but I will say right now and repeatedly throughout that your team has been very accessible and has taken specific action to achieve pretty significant results in Carson City when we've deployed them to do so. So again, we want to make sure we're deploying that strategically, but the goal is to be a low drama partner to these legislators, let them know we have expertise in these areas, and help them land on the right decision for themselves.
Wonderful. And I do want to take this opportunity to acknowledge to the public and my colleagues that this is the first time you're seeing this, and it will be posted for the public and made available to us after the meeting. Thank you.
Well, so much for my thought that this was all trade secrets. So your platform has 4 planks. I'm just going to touch on little pieces from each plank. The first is embracing a truly modern educational system. Your cornerstone of that was a bill that you had requested prior to Pinion's arrival, Senate Bill number 56. That bill does not have a future in the legislature, but the reasoning behind it is the bill itself created another commission, and the feedback from legislators were we can't even find people for the commissions we have, and the prevailing question was, can't NAS just do this? And we said, well, basically the commission we're creating would be the 17 school superintendents. So if you're going to listen, we'll do the work, but the key component is your listening. So what we're working on right now is finding a way to engage with the Interim Committee on Education to get the work done and engage meaningfully without actually having to change the law or use state resources in a way that would require sort of extra effort on our part. Another piece of this is Assembly Bill 296. We talk about strategic alignment between the Department of Education and the districts. We talk in the platform about reclaiming instructional time that is used for testing. AB 296 is a test time bill. It came out of drafting to basically penalize schools that spent more than 2% of their time on testing, and we met with the sponsor and said, hey, we want less test time too, but I don't know if taking money away from schools that are doing it is going to be what gets us there. The sponsor, Assiliman De Silva from Southern Nevada, has engaged very productively last week. In fact, and I want to commend your staff because we had I had asked for Joe Ernst or Laura Davidson or Sandra Aird to come to Carson City and sort of be backup for us in a meeting around this bill. And rather than or, what I got was and. And we had a very productive meeting with the bill sponsor. I know I just said I didn't like it when a bunch of public employees showed up to do the same thing, but their expertise from various perspectives was very, very valuable.
Thank you, Dylan. I just also want to point out, and I appreciate you being here, point out for the trustees and for you that the superintendents are also really, all the superintendents have agreed that we would like the ability to use either iReady or MAP to show our read by grade 3 progress. We are still waiting on that answer. Should they not work with us on this. We will be double testing all of our K through third graders here in the Washoe County School District because we've adopted iReady, and that simply doesn't make sense. So I just want to put on the record that I hope those conversations are happening, because as people know, the litmus that I use for making my decisions is, does it pass the common sense test, and is it good for kids? Double testing kids does not pass the common sense test. It isn't good for kids, and we would be in violation of whatever came out of this if we had to do that.
Thank you so much for the feedback, and I believe for a moment we've exposed that you have communicated that to me, and I'd never like to set anybody's expectations too high, but the change that you are seeking may have been proposed as a potential amendment to AB 296 to be incorporated into the bill. But there again, I do not want to set expectations too high. So, okay, so I have been derailed. The second plank of the platform is to create space and opportunity for students to thrive on their own terms. This is a challenging plank because, as you know, legislators show up with 1,000 ideas that they think would be good for students and that would achieve this block. And we also have in our platform that we're not terribly interested in any unfunded mandates, and most of them would be that. So, but that said, we do have the opportunity, and this is again where the district's expertise comes into play, to kind of operationalize some of these good ideas without the need for legislation, or to find areas that don't really impose a cost. And one of those is a simple one, Mosca's AB 241, which just expands some access to college and career-ready diplomas. Just makes it a little easier on the students with no additional burden from us. And I can tell you again, we solicit input from all sorts of staff across the district, and this one was one of my favorite, where I just had 3 people just sort of say, seems good for kids, let's support it. And then Mark Mathers didn't tell me it was going to cost us $48 million. So we took great joy in being able to show up and support the measure. There's an attempt to bring back the school supply assistance account, which got cut during the pandemic. SB 212 hasn't been heard yet. It's a placeholder, I think, in place with another bill that we're gonna talk about on the next slide, I believe, and we'll get into it sort of then. And then Senate Bill 80 talks about the treatment of head injuries for student athletes and actually non-athletes. This bill is brought by the Nevada Youth Legislature, a very impressive young woman who asked for a meeting with the superintendent when I had been sort of on this gig for maybe 3 days. And we sat down with her and Rollins Stallworth and sort of talked about her vision for this bill. She's a rider. She rides horses and fell and had concussion. And because she was not in a formal student activity, there was like no protocol for her return to school. And it really just sort of closes that loophole. And, just a nice opportunity for a problem that we probably didn't know existed until then. So, as everything, we have in the platform to advocate for sustainable strategic funding. A lot of work went into the pupil-centered funding plan, and we wanted to protect that. And luckily, it worked the way that it is supposed to be working. And I believe Mr. Mathers has been here to tell you exactly where the budget lies right now. I don't want to mislead you by saying a wrong number, but all districts across the state will get funds higher than the previous biennium. I try to talk about this very carefully, though, because this is increased funding, but it's not really increased revenue. The formula whereby you are allocated money remains unchanged. It's just that the state's revenues have increased, and under the PCFP, your revenues are also increasing. We're wary about that language because very much I don't want to disparage people who appear regularly on the ballot, but folks want to take credit for things that were going to happen anyway. And we want to make sure that we are saying, yes, we are grateful for this, but we all have to acknowledge that this was going to happen anyway. This didn't require affirmative action. This is how the plan that was designed 4 years ago is supposed to be working. So we're just being a little bit careful around that. Of course, I know we convey that everybody's grateful to have sort of more resources to accomplish this very difficult mission, but that's working out for the moment. Assembly Bill 344 was going to make some fixes to that formula and the way funding would be allocated, particularly by eliminating what is called the regional cost adjustment factor. The legislature is not going to consider that bill. However, the money committees have basically resolved the issue by setting all districts at the same funding multiplier. So the issue at hand was mysteriously, despite it was not the recommendation of the Commission on Education Funding, anyway, the commission recommended every district get the sort of same amount with no multiplier. The governor's budget came out giving a little extra weight to Clark County. That has since been taken out of the budget, so now all the districts are back to being equal. The fourth plank in your platform is to give personnel support that they deserve. Yours was the only platform in the state that we saw that advocated for resources to adjust teacher pay.
I'm going to stop you right there because
Proceed.
for everyone listening and for my colleagues, I want to add a moment of emphasis to that. Ours was the only legislative platform from any school board in the state to do that. No intention to interrupt. That is worth a moment of recognition. Thank you.
No disrespect taken at all. Frankly, Madam President, it is your meeting and I'm interrupting you. Senate Bill 231 is looking to match funds that do apply to personnel raises once the initial pot of money gets distributed to the district. This you could call extra money. They are setting aside $250 million total, proportionate to the number of personnel in the district. So we would anticipate about 10% of that being earmarked for Washoe County. The methodology prescribed by the bill to hand these funds out is very wonky. Mr. Mathers on your team has given us some recommendations, and the Senate leadership behind the bill is very open to working with us. It is just sitting in committee right now, this bill, probably waiting for what we call the end game. So I would, as with any client with a bill wrapped up in the end game, I would caution not to get too emotionally attached to it, but we are doing the work we need to do to make sure that if it is to move through the process, it moves through in a way that is implementable and doesn't leave us, and by us I mean WCSD, addicted to the funding. So if the legislature were to come in and sort of discontinue it, we don't have to sort of fill it from general fund is the issue.
And on that note, and so this is just an item for discussion. We're not taking action. We're not providing direction. I think SB 231 is very interesting. And I also wonder about sustainability around it. But I appreciate what they're trying to accomplish with it. But I do wonder about sustainability with that funding source.
And then finally, under this plank, I wanted to bring up Assembly Bill 285 and 330, both of which passed moments ago while we were sitting right here, 38-4 each. And these are just some tweaks to the disciplinary changes that came in 2019 to restore a little bit of educator control over their classrooms.
I'm going to interrupt you. I know that there were some, and I know this just passed, so I don't want to put you on the spot. I know that there have been some discussions. Is one of those the bill from Assemblywoman Taylor? Because I saw some conversations around providing supports or maybe making some changes for children that are 6 to 10, and discussions about how that bill may evolve or how they're considering that it could evolve, and that affects the restorative practices and the age ranges of students. Is that bundled into what was just approved, or is that separate from this?
No, the bill you're referring to is Assembly Bill 285, is Assemblywoman Taylor's bill. It has been heavily amended since the committee, as has Assembly Bill 330, which is Governor Lombardo's bill on a similar topic. There was a third Assembly Bill 196, I want to say, from Assemblywoman Hanson, and since they had two other vehicles, basically what they did is they carved Assemblywoman Hanson's bill up and put it in the other two measures. But yeah, these will continue to be discussed. They needed to be voted on today to get through the first House passage deadline. They will go over to the Senate, and by no means would I consider either of these fully baked. And each one is sort of worthy of a dissertation on its own, but I'm happy to provide the board with further updates if you wish.
That's good for in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's important to me, as part of all of the work that me and this firm do, to sort of give the credit where it is due. It is easy for somebody in this position to say, oh, you know, we just did all the magic ourselves, you're welcome. But that's obviously not the case. I mean, most of you have met me, so it's incredulous on its face. But the WCSD team has been a pleasure to work with and has provided us with tremendous resources. I made a list of names. I'm probably not going to do that, because it got very long. But know that if you are listening to this or watching this in the future, and that we have interacted about the legislature at all, that interaction has made us better at our work for you in Carson City. This is a meaningful project for us. It's an important project for us, and to the trustees and the superintendent, I want to say especially thank you very much for the opportunity to work on a project like this. This has been great for us. The other piece is we really have an amazing delegation, a bipartisan delegation from Washoe County that is looking out for this district and for its students. I will get calls and texts from them at all hours of the day looking for answers. I will pass some of those questions along to your team, and they get back to me in short order. But you know, I don't think that there's a single member of that delegation that doesn't sort of share our goals or our values here. We have 4 members of the Education Committee from this community, 4 of 11. So we're punching pretty far above our proportional weight class on that committee, and they're doing a great job taking your concerns and taking the district's feedback and incorporating it into the work they're doing up there. I pushed the wrong button. There we are. We are, of course, always available to anybody on the Washoe School District team. Trustees who have reached out to me directly, you know the deal. I reply and I copy the superintendent just so she knows what we're working on out here. But we try to be as accessible to everybody here, no matter what they do, as is possible. There were some of your teachers up there on a different topic. I bought them a round of drinks. Whatever you all need in Carson City, we are there to support. We have just over a month left, if you can believe it. This all wraps up on June 5th. With the big stuff, you can ask me questions, but after doing this for 20 years, I know not to give you any certain answers. We don't know where the budget is finally going to land. We don't know where the discipline bills will ultimately land. We believe that there is a plurality of support to achieve some of these big issues, but if there's a particular, chapter or section of a bill or of a budget that is of interest to you, I cannot guarantee you that that's how it's going to come out. But we are going to continue to interact with your staff day in and day out to make sure that WCSD gets the best possible deal out of the legislature. We know that your work doesn't stop just because 63 people are volunteering to do some work in Carson City right now, and we try and minimize that impact on you, but please know that every day we're out there working. And with that, Madam President, I am happy to conclude and take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. You're just doing a wonderful job on behalf of the district. This is my first legislative process. You have made it friendly and understandable, and the relationships that we're building will benefit not just this board, but most importantly, the families and the kids and the staff that we serve. I had a quick question. If we could go back to the slides that have the bill numbers on them. There was one that I didn't see, and I'm not going to put you on the spot because I don't even know half these numbers, but there's a bill that you may want to have on your radar. It's SB 291, and it's around student teachers and being able to pay them and employ them as substitute teachers. So I'm not, again, because we're not directing anything, but I just wanted to raise your awareness on that in case that's something that the district wants to consider, unless you happen to know about that.
Oh, I have another one I want to
Okay, so I just want to raise that, again, not putting you on the spot, but I just want to raise that as something that may be worth looking into.
I brought my laptop because I've got my whole database of the bills we're watching for you, and that list that is on the list. And without getting into too much detail, it is we are on it.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Trustee Mayberry, followed by Vice President Nicolette. I looked right, by the way.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Dylan, for being here. Mr. Shaver, excuse me. Looking at slide 7 for a moment, if you can go there. And by the way, just before I address my question, just for clarifying question, SB 56, that was our BDR, is that, am I understanding that correctly? Okay, so that's the one that's essentially died, and we can work through the interim.
The bill itself has died and will continue on in spirit.
Okay, well said, well said. You had said something, I just want you to, because I appreciate your style, I do, but you made a comment about the per pupil centered funding formula, I believe, and you said that this is the way it's supposed to work. Can you crystallize that comment a little bit more? I guess I didn't understand.
Of course. In 2019, after really a couple years of work, the legislature changed the way we finance education in the state from the Nevada plan, which was essentially keep all of the local taxes local and then provide a state supplement to get everybody equal, to the pupil-centered funding formula or pupil-centered funding plan, which takes all of the local revenues earmarked for education, throws it all into a big pot, and then parcels it back out. This is, of course, separate from like our WC1 funding or things like that. And the way that that formula was supposed to work and is working is it pools all those funds along with sort of a state supplement, and so then they grow commensurate with the growth of both the state budget and those sort of local sources, and then get parceled out on a per pupil basis. And then there's some math that I'm not smart enough to tell you about that balances out, you know, special needs categories and multipliers that sort of weigh on up there. But what happened was not nobody made an affirmative decision to sort of add these funds this year. These funds came through because of the way the formula was designed. And if anybody made an affirmative decision one way or the other, it was not to tamper with it.
Okay. So what you're suggesting is that this would have, as you said, this would have happened anyways because of the way the formula is designed.
That is correct.
Okay. I guess it was in that context. I misunderstood you, so thank you for that. And then if I could ask you, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this. I know our time is limited. The AB 344 and then the governor's bill, I think it was AB 330 or maybe it was SB 330. These are the bills on the student behavior. Can you give us a little summary on how those bills would change outcomes, contrast to today?
I can give you a summary as I understand it. Understanding, of course, that I have spent 2 days standing in front of classrooms throughout my entire career, and I was very bad at that. So from the perspective of an underground teacher, I cannot replicate. But what I will say is there were provisions in the original sort of restorative justice bill that were not quite finished at the time of the bill's passage. The bill sponsor passed away midway through a legislative session. The bill was headed in the right direction, but after his passing, there was, and this is a difficult thing to talk about, he was a friend, but after that incident, there was no momentum to sort of continue to work on it and change it as a matter of public policy in a way that was perhaps more easy to implement or to train around or what have you. We saw that pass in 19, and then in 2020, of course, a pandemic that uprooted how every school district does their business, right? And to your credit, I think this district did a good job minimizing that effect on students, but also we have to realize that that was happening in the background at the same time this law was sort of to be implemented. And what we have seen since doesn't require my commentary, but there are and have always been disciplinary challenges at the school. Both of these bills are designed to provide teachers and principals with a little more support that they didn't feel like they had previously. They are, so long as there is a route to return, they provide for the expulsion of children who assault teachers or sell drugs on campus. And I have gotten through many conversations with people on your team. Of course, nobody wants to expel a student in those situations, but also as a purveyor of a public service, there are 19, 25 other kids in that classroom that also deserve students, and the world cannot stop moving because of one disruptor. So those bills and throughout the legislative process, those bills are going to work to find a balance there. The good news is, or at least I take faith in the fact that both Dr. Taylor and the governor in those bills relied heavily on Dr. Lamarca on your team in helping to craft them, and he has done a great job. I get many requests for him just to come visit. I decline most of them because you all have work to do down here, but I suspect if you talk to him about it, not in this setting, you can see a lot of his footprints on those measures.
Thank you. And one more. It's hard to believe all these are going to
Trustee,
get done.
maybe
Okay,
really
go ahead.
quick, as a bit of a preview to my colleagues and the public, a lot of what Mr. Shaver's sharing will also be discussed in our workshop on the behavior manual and the discipline matrix as well.
Yeah, okay. It's hard to believe a lot of this is going to get done in 5 weeks. So yeah, I'll stop with some of the in-depth questions, but I am curious, just in closing, and you know, maybe the superintendent can chime in on this. I'm interested too in any conversations, any discussions on the needs of our special education kids in terms of maybe providing incentives to those entering the workforce that are going into special education. Because I know the funding was generally flat for that population of our student body.
I told the superintendent a couple of weeks ago that if what you wanted was a lobbyist who minced words, you probably didn't hire the right guy. So where you say flat, I do have to push back just a little bit, because what they did was they increased the per pupil funding in this space and then decreased the number of pupils who were counted. So you get the same amount of money, but essentially they're trying to say, look, we raised funding for these categories and then redefined these categories for you, which, I mean, after 20 years of going up there, I know why they did it, and I'm sympathetic to that, and hopefully provides room for growth in the long term. But I couldn't help myself but to get that little dig in. That said, there are workforce incentives, and honestly, I'm not conversant on them sort of in play. The sort of Teach Nevada account that will be previewed in Assembly Bill 400 tomorrow night. That is part of the governor's omnibus package. Generally speaking, it's a pipeline bill for all stripes of educators, with, I believe, different weights for different types of educators. That said, the way they fund it is by sweeping school districts' ending fund balance from above 16 and 2/3%. So we do have some details to work out with with the sponsor over the way that those incentives would be funded.
Thanks for listening to me, and thanks for all the work you're doing down there.
It really has been a pleasure.
Next up is going to be Vice President Nicolette, but I would like to formally welcome our student representative, Ivy Betmall. Thank you for joining us, Ivy.
Welcome, yes. Good segue, and thank you for what you and your team do. So SB 158, it is the special education, video cameras, surveillance, etc. It's going to move forward. My question is this: has there been and how could we have discussion on the fact that it's an unfunded mandate? And I noticed that the fiscal management part of it, as far as fiscal notes, the state charter school authority, they did submit their fiscal note. How about the rest of our school districts? And because I'm very concerned, not about the intent at all, but about the cost and the future maintenance.
Thank you so much for the question. Senate Bill 158 was amended coming out of committee in kind of a wonky way, but that way does not address the state fiscal note. So first thing and foremost, you said it's going to move. What I would contend is it left the Education Committee and has been re-referred to the Committee on Finance, which is a much tougher sell. For it to proceed now, somebody has to find a way to offset those costs specifically within the state budget. And for a number like $500,000 for somebody in the minority party, that's a lift. That's a lot of money. It doesn't sound like it in the scheme of a $8 billion biennial budget, but for somebody who's part of an 8-vote minority, that's a tough thing. If that were to happen, there are a litany of legal and financial challenges to that that we're just scratching the surface of. You may say that certainly from a purely fiscal standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if I were to talk to Mr. Rombardo, I would say certainly even if we could pay for it, what happens if somebody requests, as a public records request, one of those videos, and as a parent myself, if I had a kid in that class, what if I did not consent to that video? There's a lot of hurdles for the idea to sort of overcome. It is sent to finance, and there's going to be plenty of time to figure those out, and I cannot, again, overpromise in this setting, or most likely not. And it will just sort of sit there with 1,000 other bills that just cost a little too much to be implemented. But we will continue to flag that and the cost and procedural challenges that it might create.
Thank you. Well said, because it's not just a money issue. There's some big legal issues. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Couple others, we don't have to weigh in on them, but since you have your magic database of what you're following, I also want to see if AB 222 is on there. That's a big bill for our classified staff. Is that one on your radar?
Yeah, okay, so this is Max's bill. Let me just pop into...
And I promise I only have one other one, and then I'm going to be quiet.
It's all right.
And it's okay. I'm really not putting you on the spot with this. It's just since you happen to have that list and we don't happen to have that list in front of us, I was just wondering if that was one of the things that the district was also tracking.
Yeah, we are absolutely tracking it. The sponsor, in fact, pulled me aside to say that he was shocked that we did not oppose the measure, but your staff didn't indicate that we should. So.
Hey, we'll take that.
But yeah, it's on the list, and we have got an eye on it. This is going to be an area similar to the last one, where if Assemblyman Carter, as a first-term legislator, can get a fiscal allocation through the committee, it is likely to pass, and if you cannot, then it will likely not.
Understood. The only other one that I have is AB 323, and that really has to do with the barriers for our teachers in the classroom. So again, not putting you on the spot, but just wondering if that's one that's on your radar.
It absolutely is, and in fact, I believe we worked with staff to get the bill to the place where we could tell Assemblywoman Torres we could support it.
Very good. Thank you. Trustee Church.
Thank you. So a few comments and questions. Whether it's AB 400, 287, 285, 330, I think most of us, and maybe I'm talking out of class, but at least myself, we want to see some kind of reform of restorative discipline. I understand AB 400 is kind of a catch-all and not perfect, but I'm just hoping that folks on all sides can come together, compromise, and not let this thing die. We really need some reform. And again, this is, maybe you can opine on this, but if you don't give Governor Lombardo some things, he can play hardball backwards and say, okay, I was on the edge on vetoing this one, but now I'm going to veto it. I don't know if you want to opine or go there or not, but that's just my own thoughts on that. Are there any, did all the bills on changing board membership die for trustees? That's my first question. And then are there any bills surviving that would rein in PERS? That's my second question. I'll stop there for now.
It is a quiz, and I whenever you get the mic, I get out my pen because you ask 7 questions at once. So, okay. So to your first remark on the restorative justice reforms, it's worth noting that the 2 bills that passed, the governor's bill and Dr. Taylor's bill, are passed today 38-4. And so I think there's pretty clearly a bipartisan consensus around those. That's a pretty overwhelming majority. The minority, the 4 votes that voted against it, basically were all in the sort of the same place, worried about kind of a slippery slope argument that if we were to adopt that view of the universe, we would be in violation of federal law at that point as well. So they are representing a community. We don't begrudge anybody their individual votes. It's a hard position to be in, but so far there has been a broad consensus to get something done in this area, and we're going to continue working on that through the Senate. And again, Dr. Lamarca has been great at both supplying language and kind of working the angles on behalf of the district on those issues. With regard to your remarks about the governor and potential trades at the end of session, I'm just going to say, yep, that's the way it be, and then and leave it at that. And as to the bills changing board membership, there were 2, one sponsored by the former lieutenant governor that basically died on election day because the former lieutenant governor is the former lieutenant governor now. And then the other is Assembly Bill 175 that we, there are a couple things unique in the platform. We pointed out, like the teacher raises. Another thing is that your platform calls out a community process to pick trustees. And so we opposed Assembly Bill 175. In response, the sponsor of the measure made the bill only apply to Clark County. So there are the cities of Henderson, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas, as well as the sort of Clark County in its capacity as operating a municipal entity that is basically Paradise Township, will get to appoint non-voting advisory members to the Clark County School Board should the bill pass. But that does not apply to us here. Our position on that as a district, I think, is what Colleen Westlake just did. And if you weren't watching her, it was something like, and that's probably where the district still lies. The challenge becomes with WCSD carved out. It's very difficult for our delegation to make a straight-faced opposition to it, and so we're prepared to get rolled over there. We're going to continue to work it in the Senate. But
quick question on that: are you saying that most of the municipalities are for it?
No, and in fact, the city of Henderson primarily is pushing for it, but that is also being driven by like the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce and a group called the Council for a Better Nevada that are frustrated with the state of the school board in Clark County. I'm on the record saying you can expand the school board with more elected positions, or you can elect a better school board if that's your concern. There is a pretty strong push from some fairly powerful interests to kind of exercise their will in this manner, and the best we've been able to do so far is to protect Washoe County from the measure. As to the PERS question, are there any bills?
Really quick, I just want to make it really clear. There was a lot of work that went into making that happen. And I will also speak 100% solely for myself that I agree with what Mr. Shaver said about how communities are responsible really for the school boards that serve them. With that said, there was a lot of work that went into this result for this bill. So
we appreciate that, and some of that work, it is worth pointing out, was from President Smith, who did a great job showing up and showing off what a devoted school board member looks like, and then the community can have their choice to vote for that person or not. But to take it to the legislature is pretty far afield. As far as, I think the question was, are there any bills alive that rein in PERS? It is still a priority of the governor's. Individual legislative bill introductions just sort of, I suspect your meaning is to lessen the fiscal impact of the state retirement system. Individual bill drafts that were aimed at doing that, I believe, have all failed at this point.
A couple other quick questions. There were some bills, including AB 400, I'm sorry, I should know better. There were some bills that would create some kind of various subcommittees on education. How are we looking on that?
I cannot give you a comprehensive list. I'm happy to sort of pull what we're tracking and send it for the trustees to review. I can tell you that at this phase of the session, rather than kill a bill, it is far easier for a legislator and their colleagues to turn that bill into a commission or some sort of study. So if we were to sort of take a snapshot in time, particularly right now, right around the passage deadlines, we are going to see a cacophony of measures to create new subcommittees and new panels to look at this or that or whatever. So we are probably at peak introduction for that concept, and we would expect to see it decline. But I can give you a list of the bills that do that in follow-up, and if anything strikes anybody's fancy, we're happy to take that feedback.
Okay. If they do have them, I hope that they sunset. And then finally, I heard a number of bills about open meeting law that might affect us. The ones I saw were not too substantial, but anything substantial in the open meeting law that would affect us?
Again, sort of plumbing what I can remember, and I can pull that up, and Mr. Lombardo, these are ones we send right to you. I haven't seen anything that troubling on the open meeting law, and honestly, I don't believe there's anything still alive about the open meeting law, but I will have to double back. Don't take that as gospel just yet. Or we can just play hold music while
That's okay. This has been a really good conversation. So Mr. Shaver can look that up, but I don't see any other lights. So no problem with pausing for a moment. And it's okay if we need to get some of this information after the meeting as well, too. The superintendent is always happy to send updates in the Friday superintendent highlights. And so we can always distribute information that way to the Board of Trustees.
I hope those are useful to you and your colleagues, Madam President. I will take this opportunity to give a shout out to JJ, who reminds us every day on Thursday that we need to get that in, because it would not happen if she didn't do that. And then we, generally speaking, like I said, we've got a database of what we're keeping track of for you, but she is the angel on our shoulder who reminds us to get those in. So thank you, JJ.
JJ is the angel on all of our shoulders, and I think that is a great place to wrap up this item for 3.01. Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Mr.
having me.
Shaver, and for your team. Please extend our gratitude to them. They are always working and always available to us, and we are grateful. And this is teeing up to be a great legislative session. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so that closes item 3.01 and also section 3. And now we will move on to section 4. These are our items for presentation, discussion, and possibly action. So we'll go ahead and we will open item 4.01. This is an exciting one. The presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the 2022-23 C Major Projects Program that include projects throughout the Washoe County School District pursuant to the attached list and the associated costs for each project in the amount of $500,000 as recommended by the Capital Funding Protection Committee. This is an item for possible action. And we welcome Adam Searcy, our Chief Operating Officer, to the table. Thank you so much, Mr. Searcy.
Thank you, President Smith. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the enthusiasm for the excitement. This might be a little bit of a warm-up, but I'll try to make it exciting. Just as a matter of process, the Capital Funding Protection Committee exists to review and recommend any funding allocations associated with capital funds. The Board of Trustees is responsible for approving it, and then subsequent contracts against that funding then just come to the board. So procedurally, that's what's going on here. Earlier in 2022, we went to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and subsequently the board and said, we'd like to initiate this facility modernization study, and we requested funding appropriate to do that work. That was approved, and then we came back with an agreement against that. That agreement included a series of community forums, around a handful of those types of meetings, and was scheduled to conclude by the end of this school year, so like May 2023. As we've gotten into it in more depth, it's become clear that it was in fact absolutely necessary and deeply appropriate to increase that level of engagement quite a bit, including many more town halls and individual conversations with important community members, as well as extend that timeline. So we've been negotiating with the consultant on how best to amend that agreement to include a great number of additional meetings, as well as right now we're targeting the conclusion of this calendar year. Rather than May, we're talking November, December for the conclusion of this engagement. So while we feel strongly about the need to do that, we need additional budget against which to execute that contract amendment. So this action was brought to the Capital Funding Protection Committee at the beginning of April and was recommended to the Board of Trustees for approval for an additional $500,000 of budget authority. We are simultaneously negotiating the professional services agreement, and should you guys authorize this additional budget, we'll likely return to the board in June or July with a contract amendment to to expand that scope of services with our consultant Canon Design for that enhanced community engagement and that longer duration of services through the end of the year. That's really my presentation. This graphic that you see here is, it's a standard, really it's a ledger of allocations and actual expenditures all since 2016, very diligently holding true to the projects that were included in the WC1 ballot measure And every time we come to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and then the board, we use this same graphic to measure our progress and really emphasize transparency with these dollars. This is what was presented in April to the committee, and that $0.5,500,000 associated with the facility modernization plan scope expansion was the sole item on the agenda, and that's the item here before you today. Thank you. Exciting, huh?
So here's why I think it's exciting, because this is responsiveness to the community. We are not rushing something through because we said we were going to follow a certain timeline. We are listening to our community, taking longer, having more meetings, and I think that's exciting. I think that that's good. We can push anything through on any timeline we set, or we can take our time and we can do it the right way. And so this is, I am no surprise here, but I like this very much. I do see a light on, so let's ask any clarifying questions. This is an item for action, and then after we ask clarifying questions, we'll go to public comment, and then we can have discussion and possibly consider action. Vice President Nicolette.
Absolutely. Thank you, COO Searcy. So the SIP, Capital Improvement Program, the list of projects, I just want to commend you for putting that together and keeping it simple and to the point, and it shows an evolution of projects. Very important information. I have attended 2 of the facility modernization plan community conversations, one in Incline and one last night. And let me see, Pine Middle School. And listening to people, I'm wondering if we could include in this professional services revision, there are so far been an A, B, and C choices. When we sit down at the table and we brainstorm with our colleagues and community, etc. And then we're also given a wonderful opportunity to create a D option, which is beautiful. I think eventually we'll probably end up with the K option in some instances. What would have been really helpful is to be able to have, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, I'm just going to ask that you go to the next one, May 8th, North Valleys High School. When the choices are offered in A, B, and C, just to keep it simple, it would be very helpful if there was some definitive research that shows conceptually and contextually, excuse me, why certain choices were made. For example, pre-K through 8th grade last night. I'm having a hard time here because may I?
Vice President, I know that Representative Ivy Botmal has her land, and if you need a minute or not. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Kind of to add on to Trustee Nicolette, thank you for making the trip up to Incline. And especially considering taking that extra time to hear from all community members and add it to your guys' timeline. I think that's really critical, especially for my community, as you saw how passionate our community members are. I would say, kind of possibly tying on to Trustee Nicolette, the presentation format of how you guys do present the ideas, or how Cannon does it, I think more information of like, okay, how we came to this resolution would, and like just more reasons why, would make people a lot more comfortable to have the conversation. I know my community was really hard to even have a certain conversation going on because they kept interjecting. But I think having it more clear about what the process is going on and why we came to these different conclusions for A, B, or C, or whichever, and making it well known that, you know, these might not be the ideas we go for. We could be going for solution K, or whichever it might be. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. And to extend on that, and I'm sorry I'm not being very clear, is if we could show some research about different options rather than, well, we just came up with this, and that's what it felt like. I'm not saying that's what it was. A lot of work has gone on behind the scenes. I understand that. But the community, when they're brought into this, when they're brought in cold, and sometimes already charged, as you know and can imagine, if we can provide simple and to-the-point research that shows some, why are we sharing this information with you? Not just because we think it's a good idea, but because research in education, and there's a lot of it, shows that these kinds of options can be very successful. So people have some meat in their discussions. There's a lot of passion around this work, and sometimes passion, it needs to get itself out, work itself out, we all have it, so that we can get to the deep dive of the discussions. And I think some grounded research could help aid in that.
Thank you. Are there any other clarifying questions on this item before we go to public comment? Yes, Trustee Church.
So number one, just real quick, so the final cost of Hug High was just under 200 million, 198, is that final?
You know, that we put those check marks there to really indicate that final mark. I'm reluctant to put that check mark there. There continues to be a 1-year warranty period, and there are open purchase orders but you know, it's not going to exceed 200 million at this point. Obviously, the school's been in operation, fully completed for nearly an entire school year. That's the current expenditures as of, I think it was like March 15th, if you scroll up on that exhibit.
Okay. And then I guess what I'm hearing is that none of this is set in stone for the future because we're going back to the constituents. We may or may not be closing schools, blah, blah, blah. So am I paraphrasing that correctly? We're not,
absolutely.
nothing
yeah, I think
so.
I appreciate you highlighting that point. This is a study that is going to be more in depth for a variety of reasons that will conclude with a presentation to the Board of Trustees that, even if approved, is merely a plan. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about that more in the next item, but very important to note that all of this work is conceptual or non-committal in nature all the way through the conclusion of this engagement.
And then following up on what Ivy and Dr. Nicolette said, having attended the meeting and talked to many constituents up at Incline, because of the unique nature of Incline, it doesn't just come down to occupancy. I mean, I'm not making a decision on if it ever comes to us on whether we keep it open, close, or modify, but I am certainly reluctant. I am certainly concerned that any closure of the middle school there would be significantly impact the community and the ability to, as far as there's no plan B if suddenly enrollment surges. So that was just a comment. And then one other, just a comment, it's probably best done offline or in a workshop or whatever, but I really think that we as trustees need to look at the makeup of the Capital Projects Board, as well as the ancillary Jeopardy question, what is?
Yes. What is the Oversight Panel for School Facilities?
You got it, thank you. Who are basically one and the same. They have the exact same membership. So at some point I'd like to have a discussion about the makeup of those, because I don't think they're really fair to the community in general. But that said, I appreciate your time and the presentation.
Thank you. JJ, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay. All right, we'll take it back to the board. So our next item is a little bit more project-based, but again, I see Ivy Batmall's light on, so go ahead and jump on in.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I know you guys will be having another forum with my community. If you guys need any help with that, I am happy to help. So thank you.
She's the smartest one at this dais, so I say let's take advantage of that. Very good. All right. So we can all see item 4.01 here, so we should be able to see what the recommended motion is if there's anyone interested in doing so.
I'm ready to make a motion.
All right, Trustee Woodley.
Okay, I move that the Board of Trustees approves the Washoe County School District Capital Improvement Program to include the 2022/23 C Major Projects Program in the amount of $500,000 to provide for projects throughout the district as recommended by the Capital Funding Protection Committee.
Second.
All right, so motion by Trustee Woodley, seconded by Clerk Rodriguez. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carries 7-0. And that closes out item 4.01. Thank you so much, Mr. Searcy. I don't think you're going too far, because now we'll move on to item 4.02, which is even more exciting. But wait, there's more. Item 4.02 is the presentation discussing impossible action to approve the Washoe County School District fiscal year 2024 to 28 5-year capital improvement plan as recommended by the Capital Funding Protection Committee. This is also an item for possible action. In addition to our Chief Operating Officer, we also welcome our Chief Financial Officer, Mark Mathers.
All right. Thank you again. Good afternoon. I'll start this one off with an important sort of orientation. This is the 5-year capital improvement plan. This item is required, or this CIP is required by NRS to be included in our annual budget submission. So while this afternoon's item is for action, it is really a motion to approve this CIP for inclusion in the overall budget submission. It is, as it says on the slide, a 5-year plan that really prudently causes us to assess our resources and our medium-term needs. It is not actually an authorization of any of these projects. Each of these projects have to come back individually for discrete authorization at a later time. So that's a unique one. I wanted to just take a moment to look at the beautiful future Jaywood Raw Elementary School from about 100 feet, looking south from October. That's exciting. All right, so that's the warm-up, and quick handoff to my partner, Mr. Mathers.
Yep, so thank you, Adam. So of course, like any kind of budget or financial plan, our major constraint is a resource constraint, a revenue constraint. I won't dwell on this any more than to say our CIP continues to rely on two major revenue sources, WC1 sales tax and property taxes, both of which we can use either for pay-as-you-go cash-funded projects or to pledge for issuance of debt. So nothing new here from what you haven't seen in years past.
Okay, so again, a little bit of context. I want to highlight there's several attachments in your materials. Was a more voluminous presentation was given to the Capital Funding Protection Committee. This too was presented and recommended to the board from the Capital Funding Protection Committee in April. So the full presentation with a number of more detailed slides are included, as well as the detailed set of spreadsheets essentially that Mark and his team put together. But this is, I think, a helpful orientation of the composition of this CIP. I think it's helpful to consider major projects commonly coming in the form of new schools. And then we've got another real pillar of our program that is our capital renewal program, we call it. It's essentially major maintenance. So think roof replacement, football field replacement, things of that nature would fall into that capital renewal program. And then now a third pillar in the form of a facility modernization program we're going to talk a lot about for a long time to come. I'm going to go through the next several slides rather briskly to try to give you a highlight of some of the most prominent elements of this CIP. You can stop me along the way, or I can burn through them all and we can talk about any and all of these topics as you see fit. So some of the highlights from the CIP, of course, is the Debbie Smith CTE Academy. This, has been delayed and a bit protracted, so there's still significant funding necessary in FY24 and 25. The good news is construction is actively underway, and there is a lot more to come to the board in June and July in terms of additional construction contracts and funding authorization. This is well underway, and we're going to see major activity ramping up over the summer and into the fall, especially for that 25-26 school year opening. Okay, we've talked about that project a lot. This one we haven't heard at the board level as much, but this one is budgeted in FY24 at this time. This central transportation yard, you guys may or may not realize we have really three main transportation yards, sort of a north, a central, and a south. The central is the largest. We've completed a study across all three yards. We've made minor improvements to north and south. The central is the largest and warrants the largest investment. So that's under design as we speak. And it's really the most flexible with respect to timing, you know, as opposed to a school that really needs to open in August. This one is budgeted for FY24, and we'll see how things play out. That's enough about that one. Diving into some new school or major projects program items, I wanted to start with the potential new elementary school in the Stonebrook area. So this slide, as this slide describes, you know, this has been on our radar for quite some time. In North Spanish Springs, they have some large master planned communities, and this was always factored into that master planned community. As you can see, we acquired the property in 2018, have since built two nearby schools, which are rapidly growing, and we're well positioned to meet the needs of growth in this area. Some key points on this slide, you know, the design for this school is underway. We want to be prepared to move into the construction phase when and if conditions warrant. Those conditions are such that Bohatch Elementary School and Sky Ranch Middle School will be the largest elementary and middle schools in the district next school year. In response to that, we're temporarily mobilizing additional capacity, as we talked about earlier tonight, and we're also evaluating more significant options, including rezoning. Rezoning is a impactful choice, but it is a choice that we will reanalyze this fall and present options to the school board for consideration, including the potential initiation of a new school construction. There's pros and cons to that, and just like Jay Woodrow, we'll bring forward some thoughtful options later this fall. But budgeting for it is really the first step, and that's what we're doing here with this CIP, is making sure the funding is available should we need to go forward with construction.
And I see Clerk Rodriguez.
Hi. I do want to say, I know I can't direct, but I would like to encourage my colleagues to really look at this. I know that out there, and I'm sure maybe Trustee Mayberry, because this district overlaps, I hear a lot about this. Just the growth, yes, that's happening, but also just the amount of vehicle traffic, and there's been accidents in that area that I know that the City of Sparks has been aware of, and they've actually been putting additional police officers in that area. But for anyone that goes and visits those schools, that area is just, I can't say enough, it's just growing crazy fast. And I know that City of Sparks is intending on more growth, so I just want to raise that and advocate for this.
I just need to help me understand how the CIP and the facilities modernization plan, how they overlap, or are they distinct? Are they melded into each other, or how does that work?
We're going to get to that in a moment, but I think the concise answer to your question is that the FMP is a subcategory or a pillar of the overall CIP. Hopefully I can bring that into focus for you before we're through here. I failed to highlight that rezoning will be considered this fall for potential implementation school year 24-25 at both the elementary and middle school levels. Again, that's a tool in our toolbox, but we'll be back to the board for consideration of this elementary school. It's all about making sure we're prepared to take the next step. Master planning the property, acquiring the property, completing the design, establishing the funding, and we'll be ready to act if and when it's appropriate.
One more. So if we weren't doing FMP, thank you again, we would be doing this anyway, correct? Because it's just needed, plain and simple. This won't really be part of that. We're already going to make decisions on this.
Correct. This is part of the major projects pillar, or a separate component of the CIP. FMP is a different component, but all part of the CIP. This is just a highlight of the CIP. Moving on to another highlight of the CIP, I wanted to highlight this one for its absence. Last year, again, we evaluate this annually. This process occurs every year, even though it's a 5-year plan. Last year and years past, a new high school in the Cold Springs area has been included in years 4 and 5 out there a ways. In the last year, notable developments or changes to the residential development market have influenced our crafting of this CIP. In addition, these are the projected enrollments. In addition to really what's driving some of these numbers are some headwinds. In addition to the slowing of the residential development market, there is still growth, but things like that high school enrollment bubble that you guys have heard about repeatedly, things like that blue line there indicates the year of opening of the Debbie Smith CTE Academy. That's a 900 and some seat additional high school to our portfolio, which will certainly attract students that would otherwise go to North Valley's high school. Currently, we're projecting that the enrollment at North Valley's high school has peaked and may not return to its current levels for 5 to 7 years. And that really has pushed the funding and the need for that new additional high school in that region to beyond the 5-year time frame. I think it's important to talk in terms of not if but when we think about this high school, but we wanted to acknowledge that the thinking on the timing of this one has slid out a little bit for those reasons. That said, this next slide talks about what we intend to do in the interim. Rather than allowing, pardon me.
I'm sorry, I see Trustee Westlake. Can you wait a moment or?
Well, are we still on the developments on the next slide? These new developments?
Or did you want the previous slide where we had the heat chart? There we go.
This one, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, President Smith. Are we doing any kind of research with these developments? What kind of families or families coming in, children, no children, retirees? Can we get some data on that? Because it doesn't matter how many homes are opening up if it looks more like it's retirees wanting to move here because of our tax structure and no state income tax, but they don't have children. It really doesn't matter how many homes are opening up. Can we get any data on that? I know on the new ones we don't know because people haven't bought them yet, but the ones that have opened up before these new ones opening up, what kind of is the base that's buying these homes, I guess?
If I could respond to that briefly, we absolutely employ a full-time demographer at the school district. Absolutely. And to your point, we do a significant amount of research, not only through our own in-house staff. Actually, on the consent agenda today was an agreement with the UNR Center for Regional Studies, who goes into a tremendous amount of detail on that type of information. And we have regional data. The number of students per capita, we call it like a student generation rate, typically is different from region to region. And we have actual data on historically how many students come out of multifamily units versus single family units in the North Valleys versus in Spanish Springs versus in the South Meadows. We do our best to monitor all of these variables in partnership with our regional agencies, in partnership with folks that study things like this, in direct communications with the owners and developers of those major projects. That said, it is a forecast, and we will reevaluate this every year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's really important. Thank you.
Oh, great question. Again, in the meantime, we are acknowledging the current enrollment at North Valleys High School and seeking to improve wherever we can at North Valleys High School and really the entire region. So a couple of points on this slide. Of course, we talked earlier about the additional portable at North Valleys High School. Not an ideal solution, but a temporary measure of some value. I mentioned the opening of the new high school. That's certain to provide some degree of relief and the pending enrollment bubble impact. But, you know, as Vice President Nicolette mentioned, we actually do have a community forum related to the FMP scheduled and publicly noticed on May 8th at 5:30 at O'Brien Middle School. Actually, we're going to highlight that centerpiece of the community. And amongst other things, we're going to be talking about opportunities through the FMP program that might add value to that entire community.
Thank you, President Smith. Thank you, Adam. I know that Michelle is here as well. I want to make sure that that change in location and time is featured prominently on our website because it was scheduled to be at North Valleys at 5. That's what my calendar said. And I want to make sure that the community knows so that there's no confusion. So I don't want them to have to search for it. I want it right there. 5:30.
Okay, so those are kind of the highlights on this one. Again, it will be reevaluated annually, and we're trying to be as responsive as possible. I think that's a good segue into this FMP discussion. You know, I titled it under the major projects, but really it's becoming its own standalone pillar of the overall CIP. The punchline here, as was detailed in a bit more at the Capital Funding Protection Committee, the funding associated with future FMP projects within this 5-year CIP constitutes a full 40% of the entire resource allocation. Now, the specifics of those projects very much remain to be determined. That's the work that we're going to do with the community and our consultant over the rest of the 2023 calendar year. But in anticipation of urgently needed projects being recommended through that process, we've programmed in significant funding in FY24 so that we might act promptly, and even more significant funding in years 2 through 5 to execute major construction projects. As we've said repeatedly, this is a district-wide study. It may include projects of a revitalization, a renovation, or a complete reconstruction nature. I highlight there Vaughn Middle School we've acted on and have named, and there is discrete funding associated with it in FY24 in this CIP. But going forward, a really significant portion of the overall CIP is going to be directed at some of our oldest and least equitable facilities across the district. Okay, so that's just kind of a highlight, brief one page on that one. Another major element of the CIP that I wanted to highlight is the need for a central administrative facility for the Washoe County School District. This is something that has long been discussed and long been prioritized lower than our needs associated with existing overcrowding and antiquated facilities. Unfortunately, through the hard work of many and the blessing of revenues across the community, we've been able to make good on many promises from the WC1 campaign, building new schools, relieving existing overcrowding, and now making progress and poised to make even more progress to upgrade our existing facilities and schools across the district. I've also talked about how this is not included in Canon design scope. It's always been, my intention to keep this separate. And really, you know, as the slide highlights, this is also a 60-year-old facility that was built at a time when the school district was far, far smaller than it is today, and its associated central services supports were far, far smaller than it is today. I think it's important to articulate that, you know, this is really about the efficient operation of that central services team in support of our schools. This isn't about the boardroom or our own lavish offices. This is about making sure that what resources we do have in terms of the Department of Academics or the business office or the human resources or any central services department that may be housed here is able to collaborate. I mean, many of those departments do not even have all of their staff co-located in the same building. So when we talk about being shorthanded for the resources that the schools need us to support them on, it's tough enough as it is. If we're located in two different buildings across town because of the space available here, that is a direct detriment to our schools. So that's really, I think, an important way to look at this. We are presenting it in the CIP this year prominently and highlighting it a couple of years away from today, so not for action immediately. And we're also presenting it at a very high level. We've done numerous studies on this. We've looked at alternative properties around town in a variety of configurations, and we've got an exhibit here that I'll mention in a moment. But those 3 bullets, you know, hey, this is to initiate the conversation about should we do this, and if so, should we buy a different building somewhere else and renovate it to suit our needs? Should we buy a different piece of property and perhaps build new elsewhere? Or could we, in fact, redevelop this property that we're on today with a new building? So a brief study that we commissioned is illustrated on this slide that contemplates a 4 or potentially 5-story building really on the northern half of this property, not dissimilar from what we did at O'Brien, sort of building new in the backyard while maintaining some operations in the front yard where we sit today. That actually on the left of that exhibit demonstrates a parking garage, so vertical parking that would provide the appropriate number of parking stalls, the code required amount of parking, while preserving really a third, kind of where we're sitting, of the total parcel size for some other potential use. So that's just one concept. I kind of wanted to really lift this need up within the CIP and leave it at that for at this point.
Quick question.
Yes, absolutely, Trustee Church. I'll go after you.
So you're not recommending this, you're just saying it's one of the possibilities?
Correct.
So I think that this is a long overdue conversation. I know that we're going to track this year over year. I will tell you that I think something we should consider is moving up the process by a full year on both sides. So the design funding potentially in 25 and the construction is 26, and I'll tell you why. With the opening of the W. Smith CTE Academy in 2025, we're going to have the ability to take some of our other locations and no longer have the leases for those. We're going to be able to bring those to W. Smith. This district is spending a lot of money to locate employees all around and not have them centrally located. We also recognize that we want to serve our community, teachers, students, families. To do that, we need a strong singular location. And although this is not just about a boardroom, the way that we actually serve our community through these open meetings is also very important. And this is all a lot of money. So I very much appreciate that we have prioritized many other projects, and we will be able to show an overwhelming amount of the WC1 money that went before this, but I do really think we should think about moving this whole cycle up a year. That's my 2 cents. I'll just put that bug in everybody's ear. Do you have a comment, Trustee Westlake, on this slide?
Well, kind of a question. Thank you, President Smith. If we did that plan that you have on this slide, would we be able to rent out office space to other businesses with this building that's sitting here right now to other businesses, insurance companies, other local businesses? Would we be able to get revenue that way? Is that legal?
Do you want to mention that? I'd like to invite Chief Legal Counsel Rombardo.
Well, I can't remember exactly. I mean, caught a little off guard, and Adam probably does, but we have a agreement with UNR that when we're done using this building, we're going to work out some type of, they have a right of first refusal. Let me put it that way. That's my recollection anyway.
It's kind of a betrothal.
To buy.
To buy. Yeah. Not a bad idea, but yeah, the area has been betrothed to UNR. And I recognize, Mr. Searcy, what I said was not a question, so I'm not looking for a response, but I did want to put it out there about my preferences about seriously considering moving this up a full year on both sides of the cycle.
Understood.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. I guess I got more of a comment than I do a question, and I do appreciate a lot of the work you guys are doing. And I do recognize that to represent our community, we should look at a new building. But I would also wonder, where are we at as far as single point entries go with all our schools? Is that something that is being brought up to capital improvement committee, or?
So as far as single points of entry at all of our schools, it's always important to emphasize that, you know, the district's been hard at work for many, many years and have retrofitted all of our existing elementary schools and middle schools and constructed new at all of our new schools with single points of entry to date. There are different configurations of high schools that have different levels of security and layers of security. That is a consideration actually on our next slide, but it's to a lesser degree. I don't want to overstate that. It's an element of our capital renewal plan, and it's also something that I anticipate will feature prominently in our facility modernization plan. So as I mentioned, all of our new schools include that as a standard element, and really a big part of our facility modernization plan is to look at our existing schools and compare them to the pieces and parts of our, or the standard elements of our newest schools, and devise ways we could improve those facilities physically to match the current standards. So it will certainly be a component of all of those projects going forward if it's a deficiency.
Right, and I do know that this district has been progressive as far as single point entries, especially with our K through middle school. I will just say that as we're looking to build things, I really would like to see, and I know I'm just one trustee on this, but I would really like to see that all our K through 12 schools have single point entries. So I'm just saying.
Okay, so just a couple, pardon me.
So I don't want to jump ahead because I also had something around the single point entries. Is now a good time if we're on the topic of it? And I know I had submitted it for one of the questions. So full disclosure, I was chatting with Chief General Counsel Rombardo. But can we circle back on that really quick? Because one of the things we didn't have line itemed here, but I did submit it in trustee questions, was around the school safety improvements, because I didn't see that specifically referenced here. And the example that I gave in my trustee question was Bernice Matthews Elementary School, which has a common style layout, and it has clear and known deficiencies that really make it hard pressed for me to define that as single point entry. But in the CIP, I don't see a line item around those continued improvements. Is that just embedded in this? And again, that's just one example, but I just want to make sure that that's somewhere in here.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good segue to our next and penultimate slide. Regarding the capital renewal program, this is a third but arguably the most important pillar This is really the bulk of the facilities department's work. This isn't routine maintenance. This is capital construction. And this, just to walk you through this slide, and I'll get to your point, I wanted to highlight this third bullet, funding increase in FY24. This is funded at a total of $50 million this year. This is a 25% increase from any prior year and really represents strong investment in our existing facilities. We try hard to prioritize this very equitably based on data and need. There are many, many, many needs across this district. These are complicated repairs and improvements that occur on active campuses, further complicating that work. And we often have to prioritize, largely guided by the nature of the impact relative to the classroom. So when we talk about HVAC systems that don't work well or roofs that leak, those tend to have a more immediate and acute impact on the classroom than other important aspects of the school district. We also allocate these resources to all asset categories of our, it's not like we put it all into roofing. So you see a whole bunch of slices of the pie there. One slice there, I'm not sure if it's called out specifically. It's small in nature relative to carpentry and MEP, but safety and security is allocated there. And so this annual capital renewal program is rolled up in this CIP, but really this represents over 100, like hundreds of projects, individual projects, many of which were on the consent agenda here this evening. And this program for FY24 will come back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and then the board in June. At that time, we can talk in a little bit more detail about some of the safety and security projects that are included in that. And that is where some of those medium and minor safety improvement opportunities are funded and how that work is completed. So this is just an overview. You can see it kind of rolled up. A lot of work goes into our roofing, our MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, super critical aspects of our existing building systems that must be maintained and upgraded. And like I said, that'll come back in June. So that's really a wrap on the 3 pillars. It's a quick overview. I think these are really noteworthy statements, but I'm not going to read them aloud. The proposed recommendation has got a typo. It should be 24 to 28. But that's the conclusion. Thank you.
Otherwise, it's going to be a busy year. Okay, we asked some questions along the way. I see Trustee Mayberry, so we'll finish up our clarifying questions. We'll do public comment, and then we'll bring it back, okay? Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam President. I do want to piggyback on Trustee Rodriguez. He stole my thunder a little bit, but I'm glad he did. He's a lot bigger than I am. Yeah, the single point access, namely for high schools, is continues to be on my mind. And I know a lot of my colleagues share that same sentiment, and I'm grateful for all the work. We have a lot of work to do. We truly do. But on the safety and security side, as important as academics are, the school violence piece, it keeps me up at night. And I think that we at times don't do enough to harden our schools. You can interpret that however you want, but when I think of single point entry, I'm specifically talking about our high schools, and I know that would be a significant hardship and an inconvenience for a lot of those schools, but I would hope that we could really accelerate some discussion, some projects to perhaps even, I don't know, maybe it's as simple as a closed circuit television and a buzzer. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to do more. I will not rest or relent until we really get a better handle on how to ensure that our schools are as safe as they can be. And I know we can't prevent an act of violence 100% of the time. I understand that, but if we can reduce the risk, that's where my heart is. So I'm sure we'll come back to this, but I would like to see some movement in this direction, rather it be higher fences as well. I mean, there's areas I know that we're overlooking. The second comment, more of a question for you, Mr. Searcy, and then I have another question for Mr. Mathers. Can you just help us understand a little bit about athletic fields? Trustee Westlake and I just spent some time at Reed High last week on the athletic field and the poor condition it's in, but it's not unique to other area high school fields. And how do you take that into consideration when you build these capital improvement plans? What kind of parameters do you use? I mean, I would assume there's not as high of a priority as, say, classrooms, but can you help us understand that?
So there's a couple layers related to, we'll talk outdoor athletic facilities. Some are more quantitatively assessed, such as the pavement, so the tracks, the outdoor basketball courts, the tennis courts are more easy to assess. Some of the turf areas can be a little more dynamic. All of our high schools have full-time groundskeeper allocations and significant maintenance staff. I mean, never enough, but there are, hands-on allocations from the district at those schools. But given all of that assessment, a lot of it is user feedback driven. So at this time, we are working with our maintenance team, looking at active work orders, talking with SFCs, lead custodians at the sites, and it's not, the squeaky wheel, but it is really a hands-on effort to identify the highest and greatest needs. On the consent agenda today, there's significant investments at Sparks High School campus. Not everything, but recently we approved, $1.5 million, things like that. That's basically the process that we go through to determine which is the greatest need, and then allocate our funds most efficiently as we can.
So can I ask you a pointed question about Reed High? You've heard some of the discussions, concerns from the administration there. Any potential action in the foreseeable future?
Reed High is a notable one. It's actually a good example. I've got a call with Principal Rosenblum tomorrow, and we anticipate visiting the school to go through some of the most urgent concerns. But, in anticipation of this conversation, I did a little bit of investigation, and I don't have the data in front of me precisely, but over the last 5 years, we've invested over $10 million into Reed High School. And we have over $5 million more anticipated to come in FY24. However, those are almost entirely into roofing and HVAC type of projects. So I don't know if that gives you a sense of the magnitude of investments that we are doing, but yet despite that tremendous investment, we're still struggling to get to every single need. And the next dimension to any response to this remains that facility modernization plan. Any project that might be directed towards, say, for example, Reed High School would have a wide range of scope and would have at least an additional zero on the end of that type of price tag.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with the principal at Reed High tomorrow.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you. And one more, if I may, Madam thank you. Mr. Mathers, now, I know you're not Jim Cramer, but the slide earlier did talk about...
He's way more attractive than Jim Cramer.
Well, we kind of glossed over it, but, clearly we're down in revenue, at least. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. WC1 revenue is down significantly. So what's that forecast for us?
Yeah,
that's unnerving.
Yeah, great question. So WC1 revenue was tracking strongly for the last several years, as we've talked about before. We were tracking above 5% year over year until the last 3 months of the fiscal year. And then over the last 3 months, we've seen it go up 2%, 2%, and then down 2%. So there is an inflection point, I think, that we're seeing in taxable sales and sales tax revenues. A lot of people do anticipate a recession, and so this would be a good indicator that something's changed in the economy when sales taxes were going up more than 5%, in some months double digits, and now we've seen really flat growth, or in the last month, declining growth. What we've kind of modeled here is a mild recession, beginning in the middle of fiscal year 24, continuing through the middle of fiscal year 25. So we've assumed 2 to 3% growth, actually, because again, a recession doesn't necessarily mean a decline in revenues. We will track it to ease some of your concerns. We have great buffer on our WC1 bonds. So right now we're issuing, our debt service on WC1 bonds is just a little over half of anticipated revenues. So in other words, sales tax revenues could fall 50%, and we'd still have enough to cover our debt service on WC1 bonds. At the end of the 5 years, we're closer to incurring debt service obligations close to 60% of anticipated revenues. Still, a 40% coverage factor is huge, right? That would have been enough during the Great Recession to cover things. So we're not being too aggressive in terms of counting those chickens. You know, the money's coming in. We have a lot of buffer for volatility of that revenue. We may very well see a decline in sales tax revenues. And part of this is, are we just seeing a shift in consumers' spending patterns between goods and services, right? And can that shift back? Yes. So we're monitoring it, but I want to reassure you we're not up to the top of the projected revenues for sales tax. We're, like I say, only allocating 50% of our anticipated revenues towards debt service.
Yeah, no alarms right now then, so thank you.
I mean, there's again some flashing signs, I would say, and we'll keep track of it. It really, I mean, just to play Jim Cramer for a minute, you know.
And you are smarter. And the Jim Cramer we're talking about is the money personality on TV. For any other human out there who might also be named Jim Cramer, that is who I'm talking about. You are much smarter than him, in my humble opinion. Apologies to any other Jim Cramer out there.
Okay. I don't even watch Jim Cramer. I was just thinking of some talk show host.
So there's two things.
Some Jim Cramer will send me an email about this. So sorry.
So there's two things. One, the Fed has raised rates more aggressively than any time in the recent past. And usually, you know, if you go back to your Econ 101 or 201 or 301 classes, it takes 12 to 18 months for Fed funds increase to work its way through the economy. What concerns some of us is the Fed hasn't waited to see what the effect of the monetary tightening has been. The other big concern is you've seen some major banks have a run on the money. And so banks are now hoarding cash for fear of a run on the bank, which means lending is down greatly. We just met with our investment managers who gave me charts on that. Lending has plummeted in the last month as, again, banks are leery of lending out monies in lieu of a potential run on the bank. So that contraction in lending will mean there's no funding for expansion of facilities, staff in the economy. And so that in and of itself may lead, unfortunately, to a recession. If there's no money to expand, then you're at best have a flat economy. So there's lots of things happening, and you've seen the warning signs now with Silicon Valley Bank and several other banks. And so, yeah, I think we're seeing a cooling of the economy for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben.
All right, we're going to go quickly to Trustee Westlake and then Trustee Willie. Then we're going to go to public comment and then bring it back here to start talking through some motions. And I'm also going to have Chief General Counsel Rombardo mention a few things to us too. So Trustee Westlake.
Thank you, President Smith. So I'm going to be the squeaky wheel and springboard off of what Trustee Mayberry stated. We shouldn't be dumping money into Reedsfield as far as irrigation, sod. My husband played on Reedsfield. He went to Reed. Like I said, my youngest, they lost the opportunity and the home field advantage to play against Liberty to go to state, and all of all of the money that game would have brought into Reed High School. It was moved to Minogue because Liberty flat refused to play on Reed's field. And Brock is 29, and the field looks worse and worse. There are referees that refuse to be in the rotation to officiate on that field because it is so unsafe. We're talking ankles, we're talking knees. It really probably, and I hate to say this, it should be pulled out of the rotation for games on the schedule. And that leaves Reed at a disadvantage. Take away the equity in this, but the only thing that will fix that field is sod. Or not sod, excuse me. Sod will not fix it. It's got to be turf. We have tried. When I was there, we fundraised to sod it.
I need to. So is it totally okay to say that schools like Reed should be considered and how it's built into the CIP? Totally there. And we heard that they're going to be part of the discussion with the facilities modernization plan, all totally part of this. But we can't get too far down on. By the way, I mentioned Bernice Matthews for the fencing, and those are examples of safety things, okay? So it's okay, but before we go down too far with the advocacy on the individual projects, we're just creeping a little tiny bit out of there, okay?
I just want to make sure that it's not for aesthetics. This is a safety issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are officials that have signed things, take me off of the rotation. I will not officiate at Reed. And that's an equity thing also. Mm-hmm. So the other thing, and I want to springboard off Adam too, because I heard him mention higher fences. So that would be a cost of taking down the fences. And, you know, the price of materials right now is astronomical. I have 6 panels out on a rental that someone drove through, and it's $2,900. Thank God her insurance is paying for it. But what if, and we probably would need to talk to the community, because the aesthetics would be absolutely atrocious, but it's not to keep kids penned in, it's to keep threats out. What about a razor wire going across the top to keep out a threat? I just wanted to throw that out there.
So with the CIP, we can say, and we can always have them come back and even do a presentation on, you know, safety suggestions, like how this feedback is coming back, things like that. But we start to get a little bit about, like, could we do the razor fencing? We get just a little bit outside. But asking about safety, wanting to make sure it's reflected in this, even having our team come back and talk about individual projects, we can totally do that in another item, okay? Thank you. Trustee Woodley, and then we're going to go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam President. So in slide number 5, we make mention of Debbie Smith CT Academy. And as it states here, delayed to August 2025 opening. Last week I had a meeting with several leadership members from that neighborhood, from that area, and I was specifically asked if there was going to be any further delays or when would the academy be opened. So I just wanted to ask you here, do we anticipate any other future delays, or does this 2025 look realistic?
Extreme level of confidence. We'll be back with additional construction contracts in June and July. But we've learned a number of lessons from our setbacks a year ago, and we're under construction as we speak. We're very confident and committed to making August 2025 opening.
Thank you.
Thank you. JJ, can we go to public comment, please?
The board received an email from Pablo Nava Duran.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to kind of move this to action, and I'm also, as a bit of a preview, going to talk a little bit about slide, if we could go to it, I believe it might be slide 12, and no, one past that, it was my slide 12 on this, where it says the central administration facilities with the 3, there we go. And now I'd like to invite Chief General Counsel Rombardo to offer what he and I were talking about.
Yeah, so it's such an odd situation because I do need this, sorry. So I should have what? Oh. So Board Policy 9405, which is the board policy that creates the Capital Funding Protection Committee, has, it was created on purpose, sorry, I gotta get the policy back up. It was created on purpose as a promise to the community under WC1 that we would make sure that community members had an oversight, a stronger oversight over our capital projects than is required by law. That was the whole purpose behind it. And so when we drafted the policy, we gave this committee more oversight than any other committee or public body that serves you. And so what it requires is we don't have to accept their recommendation. We can make amendments or changes to it. And if we do, if you do, then what would happen is it would have to go back to Capital Funding Protection Committee, and they would have to consider your changes to the plan. And then if they accepted your change, that would be it. The issue's over. If they don't accept your change, they would then send it back to you, and you as the Board of Trustees get to have the ultimate decision. But you do need to place, not only is your vote recorded, obviously, but then you would need to create a document in writing, which we would do for you, about why you made the decision you made. Now, let me be very clear, though. This doesn't mean we can add projects that we want to add, such as no offense, the Reed football field. I don't think that's on here. I didn't see it on here when I was trying to get up to speed on this. It has to be this plan, but for example, you could reorder it, or you could say, I don't want this part of it. You just can't add anything that wasn't already considered, because that would be a open meeting law violation, because the public would have no way of you knowing that you were going to discuss that. So, so that's how it works. There's some smaller, minute details. For example, there really technically needs to be a writing that goes back down to the Capital Funding Protection Committee, but that's only if you deny the plan. If I understand what President Smith wants to do correctly, she's not going to suggest denying it. She's going to suggest amending it to move this up in the rankings, I guess, for lack of a better term, or the timeline. That would be the best term. So that's how it works, but you can amend it. You can send it back down. They'll review it. If they approve it, it's done. If they don't approve it as amended, it comes back up here, and you do have the ultimate say. But it is just a way for this board, and it was a promise made to the community when WC1 passed, that we would make sure to involve community members.
Thank you very much. So I am going to make that motion, and for the record, I'd like to explain why before I make the motion. So what I'm interested in doing is, and we'll see what happens, because none of my colleagues know was going to do this, because I didn't even quite realize that. I actually did not realize that we had the ability to make an amendment. So to be really clear, it does not override anyone. It takes this one amendment, it brings it back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee. They reconsider that one item, and then we see what they say based on that. So with Debbie Smith opening in 2025, and knowing that we'll be removing some of the external leases that we have, in knowing the amount of money that the district is actually spending right now, the displacement of multiple teams, the inefficient use of this space, the fact that we need to more properly service the community. We are servicing the community in this boardroom, and we will be able to do so even better with a new boardroom. But particularly around the inefficiencies with staff, the money that we are spending, and creating a closer opening period to reducing those other leases and bringing it to a new district office, and the timing of when Debbie Smith is opening. That is my public record for why I believe we should look into moving this up a year. This does not approve this project. I want to be really clear. This does not make it so. This just changes the timeline for how we will consider it. It does not make this project actually happen. So with that said, and we'll see if I get a second, I move to amend the 5-year capital improvement plan to reflect design funding for a new central administration office in 2025 for construction in 2026, and to send this recommendation back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee. All right, so motion by me, seconded by Clerk Rodriguez. Is there any discussion on the motion?
If I may, hopefully this stays on the right lane. I do want to emphasize just the importance of single point entries for remaining schools that do not have them.
Good. That's actually a great clarification. We are still going to make a blanket motion at the end. This is one standalone amendment to the plan, and then we will still have a blanket motion to approve the whole plan as well. Okay? Vice President Nicolette.
Thank you, Madam President. I guess I have a question for both Adam and Mark. One has to do with adding this kind of work to an already complex plate of projects. And for CFO Mathers, can we squeeze this in? And then overall, I will say I am uncomfortable sending this back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee just because that group of experts, they do their deep dive, they do their homework. And so they have already made a decision based on information. I don't know how that's going to look for them. Having said that, I think it's very important that we address this. I've thought that for quite some time, central administration facilities. And also that bumps up again against my desire to concentrate more on our schools. So I will say that I'm on the fence here. So to my two questions, please.
I'll give a crack at that. I want to acknowledge the work of the Capital Funding Protection Committee as you have. The video of that meeting is available online, and they did, in fact, probe, a number of members probed very intelligently on this item specifically. So I want to at least acknowledge that there was robust discussion and thoughtful consideration of this. And to your point about the bandwidth, I'll let Mr. Mathers speak to the resource availability, but this is not only a very complicated project, regardless of option 1, 2, 3, or to be determined, but it's very atypical for our work. So it's not like let's just build another school of this type. So there will be some custom expertise, some consultant resources that would need to be included and hired. But that's what we do. To say nothing, I think I need to note there would be some serious cheese being moved for some individuals, and that is complicated. No different than the FMP. Change is something not to be taken on lightly, but this is needed, and we can take on that task.
Yep, Mark Mathers for the record, just to talk about the resources. So what we would need to do if the motion passes would be to amend the CIP to move not just the expenditure side up a year, as you know, but the revenues up a year. But we contemplated debt financing of this facility. We have the wherewithal to move it up a year and accelerate that bond financing 1 year. So that's not an issue.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to add on this too is that what we're doing is, what my motion does is sends it back to them for their consideration. And I will go on the record right now as saying if the Capital Funding Protection Committee says no, we really just don't think we should do this, I will honor that and I will not bring that up. What I'm doing is I'm asking them to reconsider this item with my motion, but I will honor what they come back with. Publicly, I'm stating that right now. Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, President Smith. And I wholeheartedly support the Central Administration Office. I mean, this building's older than me, so it needs to be replaced. But I'm on the fence too, to be honest with you. I really want to see a commitment in. I'm not suggesting I haven't, but I want to see a greater commitment in our security, single point access. And I'm looking forward to that modernization study. But I'm just concerned that some of these things may may be a little too late. So I don't really have a strong opinion. I'm very comfortable with where we are with it, respectfully. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't know if you'd have the figures or just kind of an estimate, but if we had more of the information too, how many other facilities are we renting out and what's the expense of those facilities? Then you can kind of, do weigh this and weigh that if we had that information. I just want to say that this building is exactly as old as I am, and I want an overhaul when we do this also.
Trustee Church.
Oh, I want to say, first of all, I support the board president in this. We definitely need a new building. I've been harping on that for the 2 years that I've been on the board. And nothing says we're going to do it. We're sending it back to the CP committee to look at it, and then it goes through the entire process. I have attended many capital project meetings, and I do want to clarify, again, I mentioned it earlier, I have my concerns with the makeup, but they don't really do a deep dive. They meet for approximately 60 to 90 minutes every quarter. That's not a deep dive where they're looking into this. Some of the committee members are elected officials that have a ton of stuff on their plate, and then, oh yeah, I got to go to this meeting too. They're not experts in this. They're not people that have a lot of time and energy to put into it. And at the same time, you have CP members that are in the trades, and they bring a wealth of information to that. But at the same time, it's hard to deny that they're not biased, that they want projects and things that will benefit their membership. So that's why I think we need to talk at some other time about that committee. But at any rate, I just want to put on the record my feeling that they don't really do the deep dive that the community might think they do. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that discussion. And this is very good, and however you feel is how you're going to vote. But just as a reminder what the motion is, so this is amending the 5-year capital improvement plan to reflect the design funding for the new central administration facilities for 2025 for construction in 2026, and to send this recommendation back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee. This does not approve the project. It sends them back to think about it, and then we would go from there. And again, I will honor whatever it is that committee says.
President.
Vice President Nicolette.
With all due respect, I cannot breeze over that comment. We don't know exactly what they do. We don't know what they do in their open time, the documents that they review, Capital Funding Protection Committee. I just have to say that I can't breeze over that. And I pay attention to their work. I watch their videos. I look at their agendas and their attachments. I think they do a very good job. And I trust their work and their judgment.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. I'll also add this really quick before we go to a vote. When I was on the Zoning Advisory Committee, several times the board sent recommendations back to our committee, and we came right back and said, nope, we meant what we voted on, and the board did actually end up adopting that too. So I want you to know when I say this is sending it back for something for them to think about, and then I'll honor what they come back with. I've also been the beneficiary of that on committees as well too. With that said, I absolutely respect how everyone will vote. On that note, we will go ahead and take this to a vote.
I think before you vote, you said that you're not bringing it back. I don't know if the second agrees with that, so can we get a record on that? So meaning if capital funding says we disagree, we want to keep it the way it is, are you fine with the item not coming back? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that should be part of your motion. So maybe if you could just say, I'd like to amend the motion to that, so everyone's clear on what our expectations are.
Very good. So I'd like to amend the motion to say that if the Capital Funding Protection Committee does not agree with the amendment, that it will not be brought for reconsideration back to this body.
Now I'm really confused.
Meaning that the amendment's going to go back to them, and will honor what they come back with. We still control the CIP, but I will honor the fact that they've said, no, we really mean what we say. We don't want to do that.
I was more comfortable with the previous motion because I don't want to be them telling us what we're going to honor or not honor. At that point, I think we should discuss it. I don't want to make that decision now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I apologize for muddying the waters, because what I meant was that I would personally, honor what they came back with. But you're right, it probably shouldn't actually be a portion of the motion. So I know we're zigging back and forth here, and I apologize for that. So can I withdraw my amendment? Okay, I withdraw the amendment so it goes back to the original motion, which changes the dates by a year and just simply sends it back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee for their reconsideration, and then we'll hear what they decide from that point. Again, it does not make this project so, and it doesn't even commit us to these dates. It just says that these are targets. Okay, thank you, and thank you all for entertaining this as well too, because this building is something that I've also been really focused on. So on that note, again, respecting how everyone will vote, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Thank you very much, Trustee Mayberry. And so the motion passes 6-1. And I appreciate that. Thank you to this body for sticking with me through that. So now what we're looking for is, and I'll read the motion, so if someone wants to just do the as moved. I'm looking for a motion for the Board of Trustees to accept the recommendation of the Capital Funding Protection Committee to approve the Washoe County School District's fiscal year 2024 to 2028 5-year capital improvement plan with the previous amendment.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, I need a first.
Okay.
So I read the motion so that someone
just
could, I
reading
teed
it.
it up because I needed to add the with previous amendment, so I teed it up for whoever.
So moved.
Okay. Vice President Nicolette with the
Second.
motion, seconded
Thank
by Trustee Mayberry. Any discussion on that? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. All right, the motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, it is 4:32. Thank you so much, Mr. Mathers, Mr. Searcy. And so let's take a break. So let's take about a little more than 10 minutes. I will hit this gavel at 4:45. So let's take 12 to 13 minutes. Thank you. and I'm going to call this meeting back to order. We're going to be moving on now to item 4.03. This is our quality of education item. This is a review of the Smarter Balanced Assessment, also known as the SBA, Mathematics and English Language Arts, also known as ELA, data for students receiving special education services, and how Washoe County School District uses the information to improve the student learning outcomes for our special education students. This item is for presentation and discussion, and we welcome Jennifer Van Tress, our Associate Chief of Specialized Instruction, and her guest.
Good afternoon, President Smith, Superintendent Infield, members of the board. I'm Jennifer Van Tress. I'm the Associate Chief of Specialized Instruction, and with me today I have Angela Flora, who is our Special Education Director of Programming. And we're here to provide an update on special education services for Washoe County School District. I believe that you all had the opportunity to review the deep data dive that you received from our Department of Accountability, our Office of Accountability. And if you have any questions about that, I do have Joe Ernst here on standby that can help answer any clarifying questions.
All right. Thank you and welcome, Ms. Flora.
So just to give you guys, just to give you an overview of what we're just going to review today, we just wanted to touch base on some of our academics. One of the big areas for special education is for us to always focus on Tier 1 instruction. One of the things I want to remind the board is that approximately 75% of our students with disabilities spend over 80% of their time in gen ed classrooms. So part of special education is always making sure that we're providing supports for our general education staff to understand how to work with children with disabilities. In addition to that, we are really focusing on working with our children with dyslexia, and we've adopted several programs that are ESSA-based, research-based dyslexia programs such as Linda Mood Bell and the Wilson Reading Program. We have that available throughout the district. The Wilson Reading Program is actually in every school in our school district, and our Linda Mood Bell programs are scattered throughout depending on student needs. We also continue to adopt specific curriculum and strategies to work with our other children with disabilities. This would include our STAR programs, our UNIQUE, our zones of regulation, skill streaming, and then additionally we are reviewing our curriculum and instructional strategies for our students in our SIP program at the secondary level. We plan to have a new rollout for curriculum and instruction for all secondary SIP. Let me jargon best myself. SIP is our social intervention programs at the secondary level, so those are working with students with behavior concerns, which as the board knows is an area of concern for us. We continue to expand our Transition Academy, and if you ever want an opportunity to see some amazing young adults do some fantastic work, go visit our Transition Academy at Inspire. And these are our students with more significant disabilities, and we work to teach them job training skills, and they actually are getting hired out in the workforce. We actually hired one of our students as a paraprofessional in one of our special education programs. So we're actually building our own workforce in the school district. We continue to expand our early childhood programs. And then the big thing I want to thank the board for was Goal Book. So you may or may not remember that we, bless you, we adopted Goal Book back in the fall. Goal Book is a online tool for our teachers, and it provides them resources, instructional strategies, data collection ideas, and plans to track our IEP progress. And we have over 661 teachers have accounts, and they have accessed over 43,000 content resources since we adopted and started the training back in October. That's huge. So we're really excited about the Goal Book adoption. We also I want to give you guys an update that we are in the middle of a corrective action plan with the Nevada Department of Education to address our early childhood and child find concerns. So what has happened As if you think about it, where we were 3 years ago, 2019, that's when schools closed. So here we are 3 years, 10 months later, and what we're seeing is a huge increase in the number of children being referred for early childhood services throughout Washoe County School District. So let me explain to you a little bit about what Child Find is. Child Find is part of IDEA, so the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, where we are required to identify and serve any child with a disability from age 3 to 22. So what we're seeing is that we're having a rather significant increase in the number of referrals coming into these little ones who kind of like are COVID babies, if we want to call them that, because the kids that have not had the opportunities for the last 3+ years to really socialize, play at the parks, go to the grocery store, go out to dinners, have your play groups, go to jamborees, all of those activities we're seeing children are missing some of those developmental skills, and are thus we're seeing a bump in the number of referrals and an increase in the number of kids coming in for early childhood. So because of that, and because there was really no way to predict this bubble, we are in a situation where NDE is working with us to make sure that we have appropriate supports in place to identify and provide the services. So we are working closely in collaboration with NDE. I meet with them every week. We talk about our process and procedures. And we plan to have the backlog completed. We have it in stages, but we'll have everything ready to go by the beginning of the 23-24 school year. Okay. Ready? So we just wanted to touch base and a reflection on what our special education programming is. And so when you look at what we provide through services, clearly the first and least restrictive environment is always that general education classroom. And then from there, when we are looking at providing special education supports, the supports may or may not be delivered in a general education setting. And so it continues to go through what we call the least restrictive environment continuum. And then which results in a more specialized instruction as we continue to work our way to a more restrictive environment. And as such, we have our different programs, such as our comprehensive life skills programs, which is designed for our students with more functional life skills needs and are on more of the path for an alternative diploma. We have our social resource programs, which are designed for our high-functioning autism or children with executive functioning concerns that really struggle with organization, planning. They struggle with their peer interactions, and so that's where our social resource program works towards. We have our social intervention program, which is really our behavior program. We have our strategies program, which is designed for children with autism or other neurologically based concerns. And so that's our strategies, where they learn through behavior interventions like discrete trial training, those kinds of things. We have our early childhood programs, and then we have our specialized programs such as Marvin Piccolo School and our Turning Point program. So next steps, just to let you know where we are, we will continue to provide our learning opportunities for all of our special education teachers in research-based behavior. We're continuing to, our dyslexia programs, our reading programs, our Ed Plan, which is our new IEP program, and then Goalbook, which has been a tremendous resource for our teachers. We are going to continue to work, especially with this alignment with the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership, and having our directors all working closely with our CNI, so our curriculum instruction directors, to make sure that all trainings that we're providing to all teachers have the component in there to help general education teachers understand how to work with children with disabilities. We're continuing to work with our Human Resources Department, our Talent Acquisition Department, to address our staff shortages. We are still short special ed teachers throughout the district, which of course ultimately impacts the services we're able to provide our students. And so I know that this is on the radar of Dr. Mason and everyone in our department to make sure that we're able to start off as fully staffed. The plan is to be fully staffed for next school year. We're working in collaboration, continuing the collaboration with the Department of Education for the early childhood. And just to let you know, we are opening 9 new early childhood classrooms for next school year to help address some of this. And then we're really excited about our Superintendent Special Education Family Action Committee. Our first meeting is scheduled for May 15th. The committee has been identified and informed, and we've got some great people to work with. It's really exciting to see how many people in our community came out to work with this committee. So I think they're going to be able to give a great voice and great feedback on some other opportunities for us to move forward as well.
Thank you. Ms. Ventress, if I could interrupt and give the superintendent an opportunity to talk a little bit around the inspiration for the Special Education Family Action Committee. I know that you don't have the direction yet because the group will decide their direction, but could you fill in some blanks about your inspiration for it and the type of work they might do?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, President Smith, and thank you very much for presenting, and thank you to Jen and her team for doing all the hard work to pull that committee together. So in my prior district as superintendent, I had a family action committee that was comprised of family members from across the community, but I had a separate, distinct family action committee for our families of students with special needs. I have yet to know or work in a system where meeting the needs of our children with special needs is not one that is not without its challenges, and where partnering with families as advocates for their children is so critically important. And the needs are unique and I think distinct from sort of general concerns. So it's based on past practice. I found it to be incredibly helpful. As Jen said, I think they're going to give us great guidance. I will be happy to bring back, especially next year once we get in our cadence, because we'll be meeting roughly quarterly, to bring back to the trustees what it is that group has identified as priorities. I can tell you that with our Family Action Committee that Delisa Crane has really worked on spearheading, we had our first meeting several weeks ago. I want to say we had upwards of 40 or 50 family members there, highly engaged. We engaged them in a thought exchange to identify the key areas they want us to focus on, and we're going to return for our next meeting, I believe, before the end of the year. It might be in the fall, it's before the end of the year, to identify what those priorities are for our work together and whether we're going to have subcommittees. Because again, I very intentionally call these action committees, not advisory committees, because I think our families want to know that if they're going to give up their time, they're not just going to be sitting advising, they're actually going to be contributing to actions that improve the lives of our students here in the Washoe County School District. So I'm grateful to everyone who stepped up to serve, and I am very much looking forward to learning from.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. I have a question on slide, I believe it might be slide 6. It's got the models of instruction, although my question's around the child find and early childhood. That's wonderful news that we are opening up 9 classes. The need for this far outmatches what it is that we can provide. What is the funding that we get from the state on this? And as we see our district change in terms of registrations, is opening up additional services like this a way that we can explore the educational service model that we offer with the community? I realize that's a big question.
So let me see if I can address that. So special education is federal state funded. They do not provide enough to cover all of the cost. So there is a large amount of money, but we are required by law to provide the services from 3 to 22. So once they are identified, no matter what our funding, we still provide the services. That said, we do receive for early childhood, I believe, it's 0.6. So like of a full-time student, it's 0.6 for an early childhood. So it's not fully funded at the same rate. So we only get a portion of the cost. So I see Dr. Enfield.
I'm sorry, this is a tough one for me. Always has been, always will. We don't have partial children. every child, regardless of age, needs to be funded as a whole. It's just my soapbox moment for.
It is not just for today. It's a soapbox moment that we should all live for, especially because these are our future students. So why are we not funding? They are not lesser. Exactly. And so that's kind of how the funding currently works. I'm glad it's on the radar, so we'll just take it from there. As far as service delivery models, we actually have been exploring that for the last year and are continuing to expand our models. So this year we had our first itinerant teacher to serve our early childhood students. The purpose of that is to provide services. So let's say we have a child in our grant-funded early childhood programs that has special needs that doesn't need to be in a program, but that itinerant person can go in and provide the supports. That did not kick off as well as we had hoped this year just because of staffing shortages, so we needed her she plugged in places to help us cover when we were short. We're continuing to expand that, so the thought is that we will have her going into private preschool programs around the district. So, and I don't want to say like, oh, we're going into Blue Kangaroo or anything like that, but that would be the model moving forward. We actually have 2 additional itinerant teachers, early childhood teacher allocations for next school year to continue to expand that model in order to provide the services for our preschool kids that in their least restrictive environment where they are currently being supported so that we're not pulling them out.
I did not know that we did that. That's really fantastic. That is really good to know. And that's also good to know that we're federally required to provide those services from 3 on up, even though we only get the funding for the 0.6. For the programs that we have here at the district, are those partial day programs?
So thank you for asking. Actually, we are, so after the pandemic, children were in the programs for the full day. So during COVID closures, we moved our programs to Monday, Tuesday full days, Thursday, Friday full days. Before that, all special education early childhood programs were half-day programs, while our grant-funded programs were full days. So we had some equity concerns over special education students and grant-funded not being treated equally. So we switched that model after we went back to school full time. So all of our programs have been full day. And as a result, from our feedback from our teachers, we have an early childhood task force that we worked with mostly last year, but we also discovered that 3-year-olds full days, 4 days a week, it's a little hard on them. So we are going back to half days for our 3-year-olds, depending on what the IEP says. Remember, the IEP drives every bit of service that we provide to our students. So maybe we have a 3-year-old who needs a full day. That will be provided. Maybe we have a 4-year-old who needs only a half day. Those kinds of nuances we'll be able to provide. But we are going to start what we call our junior pre-K programs, and those are designed for our little babies that are just coming into school that are going to have that half-day program. So we'll go back to that half-day morning, afternoon programs for our junior pre-Ks.
I am signing up for a classroom visit for the junior PK program right now. A question that comes to mind with that is, so the one teacher then does the both sides. So does that mean that teacher almost has like a double class? And how do we make sure that those teachers are supported and not burning them out? Because that's, I understand why, having had young children, backing the logic, but I immediately thought that this is a teacher times 2.
Actually, I'm going to let my esteemed colleague who has been spearheading all of this. So Angela Flora has been spearheading all of this work, and along with our Jessica Medulla and Tina Springmeyer here, this has been a strong collaborative effort between all of us. So would you like to explain?
If I can figure out the microphone, yes. Angela Flora, Director of Special Ed Programming. So yes, to answer your question simply, it's yes. However, so we'll have so for example, our preschools for our kids with a developmental delay. If we had for for the half-day programs. So they'll have 12 little guys in the morning, 12 little guys in the afternoon. But those students go home, you get your nice lunch in the middle, you don't have a duty. And then also our students who stay for a full day, we only put 14 students in the classroom, so they have fewer kids, but they have them all day. So if you have students with behavior issues or, you know, students who require a little more support, you'll have those students all day. So really what we found was, for the most part, teachers had a really good idea about whether they wanted to do a half-day program. Some teachers thought that is the best way to serve the kids. Some teachers want to do a full-day program and really work to align those wants and needs with our students' wants and needs, so we were able to come up with a good balance. So, you know, like I said, some of the teachers were like, why do I have these kids all day? I don't want 14 kids all day. I'd rather have 12 in the morning and 12 in the afternoon. This is 12 in the afternoon, or 12 in the morning, 12 in the afternoon. That is the state caseload size. So we're still within our parameters there.
This is not an item for action, so this is not meant as a directive. That's great, and that's good to know. I would hope that we also, to whatever degree we can with our funding, provide aids, because that means these teachers also have an unusual number of IEPs and paperwork, and so I am not an expert in this, but that sounds like a very good plan. I just want to make sure that we're also not burning them out, because we know that these students also have additional administrative needs that come with them. So that's not meant to be prescriptive or directive, but just an acknowledgement.
So, and let me clarify, so all of these programs come with at least one program paraprofessional, and that person is a 30-hour-a-week allocation, while the programs run a max of 25. So automatically, we have an additional 5 hours of support for the teachers and the building, however that is determined to use, to help plan, set up, clean up, whatever type of support that our early childhood teachers need. In addition to that, if they need additional support, we have a great instructional rubric that principals and staff fill out for us to allocate additional resources, and so they could have, technically they could have as many paraprofessionals as they need. Hopefully, they also value teaching independence, and so we're not having too many paraprofessionals. But we do provide more than one if that's so needed.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I have some questions on the stats of how many of the students are in IEPs. Is now a good time, appropriate to ask? The stats, 18%, almost 20% of our male population is IEP, but yet only 11 female. This is so important, but I am just so confused. Can you kind of tell me why that might be?
Yes, it is an interesting statistic. I would say that statistic is a national reflection of what we see with children with disabilities, is that there seems to be a higher percentage of males identified.
Okay. There we go.
And we're back. That was a good question.
No, and we're not.
Just jump over, reset all your air conditioners. So about the new building.
Well played.
Yeah.
It's because you turned on the air.
Okay.
Who hit the switch?
My heater's off. It's on me.
Shall we proceed?
It was
or
really
wait for
on.
that, or?
Why don't you wait for the power? Oh, are
The Zoom.
the live feed off, the little blue lights on?
Oh, I don't know. Is the light
Sys-
on?
System loading.
And not only that, the opening off conference, like that if there's a malfunction, they'll keep going. As long as
Yeah,
we're
the
recording.
live feed
not an
may
action
have
item.
stopped, but the recording is still going.
Clarify that, because I thought it was an
So for the record, we had a power outage at the building. We're unclear as to whether or not the live feed is still going. However, we still are recording the meeting. The open meeting law contemplates that if there's a malfunction of some type of technical device, such as a power outage, that
the meeting doesn't have to stop as long as we're recording.
All righty. Quick comment. I won't beat a dead horse, but I have lots of opinions on recruiting and retaining staff, as the superintendent and I even discussed today. So I know that some of the students, you said it's at age 22 or 23 that.
So it's up till their 22nd birthday. So
is
the
that,
day after is.
Got it. Is that all IEP?
Yes, unless they have so there's a couple of reasons why special education services stop. One is that they hit their 22nd birthday, they get a standard diploma. So all of our students that receive a standard diploma, then they have met the requirements under an IDEA, the IDEA law, so those, they max out as well. So like the 18 to 22 are for typically our children that receive an adjusted or an alternative diploma. And those are more, typically are more impacted students that are really workforce.
More profound disabilities?
Yes.
Okay. Do students ever exit IEP?
They can. So we do. So let's take a speech only. So I am a child with I'm struggling to pronounce my R's. So once I learn that skill, then I have mastered my goals and objectives, and I am exited out of special education. So yes, we do have students that exit out of special ed as well.
And then just final question, I could go on forever, but time is short. As I understand it, there's 13 different criteria that could get you an IEP. Mm-hmm. Is there one that really stands out as most common?
Well, learning disability is our most common disability in most places. Speech is a second most typically common. I will say that since I've been in special ed, which has been a very long time, we have seen a significant increase in the number of children diagnosed with autism, and we're seeing that spike again. We had a big spike back in the late 90s, early 2000, and we're seeing that spike again now.
So I think it's maybe fair to say it's government or medical ability to diagnose, not that we're seeing an increase in autism, but we're seeing more kids diagnosed.
Well, there's a lot of debate. I think a lot of this is also part of a result of children not having the same experiences that we've had pre-pandemic. So, having those opportunities to play and socialize, the impact of anxiety can manifest itself to look like disabilities or manifest into disabilities. And so I think that's part of the reason why we're also seeing an increase. I would say that the spike we saw a long time ago was definitely due to a change in the diagnosis procedures for children with autism. There's a lot of research that was being done back then. Now I think what we're seeing is as we come out of the pandemic, and we had kids that didn't attend in-person school for 2 years. And so that impact on their development, it's hard to measure. Is it a disability or is it just lack of opportunities and exposure and the emotional development that is happening? And that is happening across the country. We are seeing a spike in our special education populations.
Thank you, Madam President.
Let's go to our student representative, Ivy Batmel, followed by Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam President. I had one question about special education does not include 504 accommodation. Is that right? So what's like the key difference between those two?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. So the difference between 504 and IEPs or special education is that a child who needs special education or qualifies for special ed requires specially designed instruction. So that means something above and beyond what happens in a general education classroom, typically. 504 are also students who with a disability, acknowledged, recognized disability, but they may only need accommodations and supports that can be provided in a general education setting. So they're connected. So, it's like IEPs in the middle and 504s are out here. So as we continue to build out.
comment first, and that is thank you for all that you do. You have a tough job. What you do is very, very hard, and I admire it. I get choked up just thinking about it. I live this every day in my own household, so I appreciate very, 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 very much the work that you do for all our students. It is incredibly important because every student can learn. I think every student learns at a different pace. Trustee Church says something I was going to touch on. I think you did, but you can elaborate. I mean, not every child necessarily may have a learning disability, correct? Can you, in a learning disability that allows them to get an IEP, can you elaborate on that? In other words, maybe it's the environment of the home life. Is that possible?
Well, it is possible. So I think that what's happening as we come out of a pandemic and the experiences that our children have had right now, it's so, there's no research done on why we're seeing what we're seeing. Why are we seeing such a huge spike in our behaviors? Why are we seeing such a huge spike on our social dynamics? What is the reason? Is it because they have a true disability, or is it because it's a lack of exposure? And nationally, we are seeing a struggle on being able to identify truly what it is. So as we continue to refine what we're seeing and the research that's being done, I think we'll have better parameters. But it can manifest itself to look like a disability.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of us forget that it's not always autism or dyslexia or something that we can feel, we can touch. I know some of our teachers are acting, providing SPED services, and they may not necessarily be certified. I know there's a significant shortage, and I know that we're never going to ever have enough funding for this population. What can we do? What are we doing to maybe provide incentives? I talked a little bit about this during our legislative platform, but going forward, can we provide incentives to reach into that pipeline and encourage maybe the existing staff that we have or those that are beginning their early careers to look into the special education?
I would love that. So we do, I know that as negotiations, that would be something that would have to be negotiated with the teachers union.
Okay.
I think that we all recognize the need to provide some sort of support and incentive to encourage teachers to work in special education. Sometimes I think they think it's, this scary thing, but it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
That said, as far as the supports that we provide, so we do have our organizational structure where we have special education facilitators who are our mentor teachers. These are our expert teachers throughout the district, and we have 15 of them strategically supporting our schools across the district. So if you look at a vertical and we have 15 of them, and there's 5 verticals, there's at least 3 per vertical. So when you think about a vertical being around 8 schools, 9 schools, then there are 3 people supporting those 9 schools. So there's one person for every 3 schools, which still doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually is a big support. They are in our buildings. They actually are housed, as you guys talked about, a new building, but these people are housed in our schools. So they work with our teachers every single day. They are in the buildings, providing the support, providing the instructional support, helping understand the nuances of special education. From that, we have our special education administrators. We currently have 7 of those. So each area has, actually our special education administrators align with our associate chiefs. So those special education administrators and our associate chiefs work directly to support and assist every school administrator and programming in our district. And then from there, we also have our directors who are there to support programming and operations. Special education is a huge operational system when you think about all the nuances of IEPs and compliance and funding and allocations, we have an entire department that does that. And then, the legal side of it as well. So the nice thing is that we, and as part of Dr. Enfield's work at the beginning of the year, we kept those special education facilitators in our buildings because we recognized with our staff shortages and with the new staff coming on board, or even those who had worked for a couple of years, it takes a while to feel comfortable. And if we had taken that support away from them and put those teachers back in a classroom, we would have lost even more special education teachers and had more vacancies throughout the year. So we're really, our mentor teachers are amazing. Our staffs do incredible work, and really, like, the teachers, they text them, they call them all hours of the night, and those staffs walk in the next day and support our teachers.
I'm going to invite Dr. Enfield, but really briefly, to your point, Trustee Mayberry, this was also one of the reasons why when this same board approved the unique MOU, providing the compensation and the recognition and all of that additionally with the special education teachers, which I think is a step in the right direction that we should always fully explore as well. Dr. Enfield.
Yes. Thank you, President Smith. I'm actually going to ask Joe Ernst to join us because I know that you provided additional background material on the Smarter Balance scores, and I would just like you and Jen to speak at a high level around the trends we're seeing in the Smarter Balance scores when it comes to our students with special needs, and then Jen, if you want to chime in on how we're using that data to make adjustments to how we provide supports. Thank you, Joe.
President Smith, Superintendent Enfield, members of the board, Joe Ernst, Chief Accountability Officer. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge Jennifer Harris, who is here. She has really helped put together this comprehensive data set around our students with disabilities. If we want to go ahead and forward just a bit to the SBAC information, what you can see there is by disability. You can see the various percentage. So 2022 percent proficient Smarter Balance assessment, English language arts by disability. And you can see in each of the categories up there the percentage of students that were proficient on SBAC. This is not atypical to data that has been presented throughout this school year in terms of substantive gaps when we look at how our students with disabilities are performing relative to their general education peers.
Thank you very much. May I ask a question around emotional disturbance and that? Okay, thank you. Thank you for interpreting my very vague question.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, so the emotional disturbance, those are our children that have been identified typically with behaviors, right? So you have to have demonstrated a behavior or an emotional response that has lasted more than 3 months documented, and that's when that is how one of the areas of how you can be eligible under emotional disturbance. So typically these are our students on with IEPs that have more behavior concerns, and typically, at that point they also demonstrate behaviors where they don't always then they're getting removed from the gen ed classroom. So once you remove a child from the gen ed classroom, then you're not accessing tier 1 instruction anymore. And by not accessing tier 1 instruction, it makes it challenging to learn the standards that drive the questions on the SBAC.
Thank you very much, because I did not, prior to this presentation, I did not necessarily realize that you could become qualified as a special education student through emotional disturbance. So that was an education for me in this process, so thank you. This is not an item for action. Are there any other questions for our presenters? I know that this is quite a bit of information. No? Seeing none, thank you so much for this important. I learned a lot through this, and I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity. So thank you, Ms. Flores, Ms. Bantress, and Mr. Ernst. Thank you so much. All right, so that concludes item 4.03 and then also section 4 in its entirety. Now we'll move on to item 5.01 in our section 5, and we get to have our student representatives report while it's light out and while she's still here. Miss Ivy Batmall.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction. So in terms of the student representative support, for our Student Advisory Council, we are getting right now, we are organizing our Strengthened Voices Conference. That'll be happening on May 19th. I'm sure some of you have possibly already heard about it. I know Dr. Enfield and I will be emceeing the event together. And then, so that's kind of our main focus right now. We'll be including students from middle schools and high schools across our district and showing them about different leadership opportunities that they can take up in their schools and different student voice opportunities they can enhance throughout their schools, and to increase the motivation to have established councils throughout all of our schools. The other thing that Dr. Enfield wanted me to mention, well, first of all, my graduation's on June 20th, so I hope to see a lot of you there. And then the second thing is next year I will be attending the University of San Diego. So, thank you.
In the honors program. We're so proud of you. Congratulations for being accepted into the honors program at the University of San Diego. We're so proud of you. Well, thank you so much, Ivy. All right, that closes item 5.01, and now we'll move on to item 5.02. These are our board reports, and we will go ahead and start with Trustee Adam Mayberry.
Thank you, Principal. Thank you, President Smith. You are the principal, and I'm just so glad I get to sit next to Ivy. I did have an opportunity to attend, to tour a couple of our charter schools. In fact, actually one is a state chartered school, Durrell Academy. Angela Orr is a principal there. It comes from the district. Heard a lot of great things about Durrell, so I wanted to see what the magic was there. Also had some time with Autumn Khan. He's the principal at Encompass Academy. That is one of our charter schools as well. That's based in the Boys and Girls Club in Reno. Very inspiring group of students. Last week, I attended Skills USA, which is a statewide competition for our career technical education students, and we had about 200 Washoe students participate in dozens of competitions, from interview skills, debate, number of trades to include masonry, plumbing, carpentry. It's just an amazing experience. An hour with Trustee Church, in fact, and I were together with Josh Hartug, who gave us a tour. It was spread out through a variety of sites in downtown Reno, and again, it just really speaks volumes to the talent and the skills of our students that are enrolled in our CTE programs. I also attended the All for Kids Gala. That's the Community and Schools annual banquet and fundraisers. Pleasure to sit next to and spend some time with Superintendent Enfield. Thank you for being there. I do represent the district on the Debt Management Commission, and we had a special meeting for the City of Sparks to approve financing for $15 million for a 6th fire station in Sparks, which is badly needed as a resident of Sparks. I appreciated that. On Pathways in Aviation, it's near and dear to my heart. This is a group that really instills and encourages and promotes aviation careers. They had a special event last week at UNR where they had actual Top Gun pilots involved in the filming of the Top Gun film Maverick. I wish I had my leather jacket and my sunglasses on. It was just an inspiring, amazing, high flight, no pun intended, venue as we continue to work toward an aviation program here at Washoe County. And Friday, I had an opportunity to ride along with our school police department, and I appreciate Sergeant Drew Olivero for his time and great discussion on law enforcement in terms of what our schools do, and gave me a lot of confidence in the safety of our schools as well. So thank you for letting me give you my report.
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. Clerk Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to apologize for my absence last meeting. I was in court for work. I was a suspect, but on the bright side, the suspect was found guilty. So there's that. So again, I apologize for my absence. Since my absence, I did visit quite multiple schools. I got to one of the highlights. I got to visit State Elementary and got to see the I-80 kind of getting kicked off, and it was pretty awesome. We had different educators from around the area, so it's interesting. I'm excited to see it, be fully implemented. Hopefully, maybe. I got to attend the Galena JRTC Awards event. Outstanding. JRTC is part of something that's really near and dear to me. Outstanding students, just the citizenship and everything they instill in those students in that program is awesome. And another champion, we do have one of the students from Galena is actually attending West Point when it was accepted. So I think that's outstanding. So for all the naysayers out there, I mean, that's pretty awesome. And as well, some of the young adults were actually committed to the military, including our National Guard. And I will continue with our OTC, Spanish Springs. There's a scrimmage event they had down in Douglas County. And I just want to say it, Spanish Springs High School has an amazing Raiders program. They won first place overall, won first place in 3 events and second in 2. So outstanding work. And then President Smith and Caitlin Evans with WEA, we got to meet with some community members in South Reno, just have an open dialogue and discussion, what we're doing and different BDRs that may impact us, and it was just good dialogue. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Thank you, Clerk Rodriguez. Trustee Westlake.
Thank you, President Smith. So I was able to do some wonderful school visits the past couple of weeks. I went to Sepulveda, Desert Skies, Mendive, Dietrichson, and Reed. And it's really wonderful to be able to get to know the principals at these schools and get to see the operations and how much passion they have for their schools. I really, really enjoy seeing just how much they're willing to give for their students. I also attended 2 junior ROTC award ceremonies, Hug High School and Sparks High School. I was able to actually give out an award at the Sparks High School. I know, and you guys, oh my God, I was so nervous because I've seen other presenters drop the medals. And so my whole time when they announced my name, my husband asked afterwards, he said, well, what award did you give out? And I said, I don't know. I was concentrating so hard on holding the certificate and the medal and not dropping it and shaking the hand and turning for the picture. But I said, I do remember the cadet that I gave the award to, and it was so awesome because I did a ride-along with Officer Baker, and we went to Sparks High, and while we were in the quad and we were talking to Principal Waddell, the gentleman that I gave the award to, he came walking towards us, and I'm like, that's him, that's him. So I did remember, and then I told him, I was so nervous I couldn't remember it, and he thought that was pretty funny. But I am going to be going to others, and now I'm seasoned, so I will be very relaxed. It was just a little unnerving there for a minute, but truly enjoyed that. I did another read with the kindergartners in Sun Valley, which I'm doing tomorrow. Sun Valley Elementary School. I leave there and I am completely recharged and just excited for the rest of the week. And I can't wait because I ordered some more books. I like to go on and order books, and I ordered the little dung beetle, the story of the dung beetle. So I'm excited to read that. The ride along with Officer Baker, she is amazing. It was really wonderful to see the perspective of our officers, and I appreciate them so very much. I know I'm taking a little more time, but she told me that the officers are going to partner with the Junior Olympics, and we have an opportunity to get a trustee team to compete. So I'll be heading your directions.
Thank you, Trustee Westlake. Trustee Church.
Thank you very much. Attended many events, including a large number of JROTC events. As a retired military officer, it's near and dear to my heart. I will mention specifically that I did give out a number of awards, and at DeMonte Ranch High School, I did give out an award for what's called Sons of the American Revolution. I want to call out Commander Van Buren for mistakenly claiming that I served in that conflict. I'm a BFW member, life member. That's a Veterans of Foreign Wars. But I can assure you, and his paybacks are coming, that I did not serve in the American Revolution. So if you're watching that, April Fool's is 11 months away, but I'm already planning. Attended Skills USA, a number of community forums, school tours. The Incline Village, JROTC, starts in about 20 minutes. So unfortunately, folks, I won't be able to attend that. I thank Trustee Westlake for backing me, co-sponsoring a couple of agenda items. I think that'll be heard in May, so that's good. Violence in the schools, safe schools is, of course, a major concern. So I remind people, I believe May 1st at 2 o'clock, the Washoe County Safe Schools, Safe and Healthy Schools Committee meets. So that's a good way that people can reach out and state their concerns about that. And there's also a state safety committee that you can reach out to, and I have attended that in the past. But yeah, just an extremely busy period, attending numerous meetings, et cetera, and a couple more JROTC coming up that I hope to attend. And I think that's it from my notes, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Woodley.
Thank you, Madam President. So since our last meeting, I had the privilege of attending our quarterly board meeting for the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association, NIAA. I was representing Region 1, that's us, Washoe County. And we had a 2-day meeting with 31 items on the agenda. None of them were consent. And we discussed everything from referee availability for all of our activities throughout the state and the shortage. I think we may have found a resolution to that. Salary for the staffing over at NIAA. There was discussion regarding statewide recognition for state academic team champions with regards to weighted or unweighted GPAs. And the question was, why do we use the unweighted GPAs? And the reason is because many of our school districts do not have the AP programs that we have. So if we did use weighted GPAs, it wouldn't be fair to those other kids going to these other schools that don't have that. So that's why we use that. We also discussed a possibility of implementing 35-second shot clocks for high school basketball. All schools were surveyed, all coaches, about 80% said yes, they were in favor of it. But then, of course, we all know that there's a consideration of the cost. Clark County has some serious concerns because they have a lot of high schools. So that's pretty expensive, so that's something to consider for the future. Speaking of basketball, I've been attending different games throughout the community, and I keep seeing Joe Ernst because he's a coach and he's out there teaching these little boys how to play and little girls, so that's pretty good. It's awesome to always see him out there. And I have played against him in the past. He's a pretty good baller, just so you know. I also had the opportunity, along with several of our co-chairs, trustees here, to attend the fundraiser event with our teachers, and I had a great time with Billinghurst Middle School staff. I was able to share a table with them, with my spouse, and that was a good event. I think Kaylin is here. We love that. And then lastly, last night I did attend the meeting with Adam Searcy at Pine Middle School, discussing the future of that school in that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'd like to share a congratulations to Team Incognito. They're a robotics club in town, and they span different schools, including some students outside of the Washoe County School District. But they really raised the profile of education in Washoe County. They represented all of Nevada at the First World Robotics Tournament that was held in Houston, Texas, and they did win an award for Best Control Methods, so congratulations to them. And yes, and then I want to bring attention to something that is really an incredible accomplishment. So the Washoe County School District has 230 national board certified teachers, and we recently added 27 of those, of the 230 are new, and it's a very, very rigorous testing process. And I received an email from Principal Nakashima from SWOPE, who was highlighting 2 teachers from SWOPE who recently had their board certification, and that is Miss Jenny Hoy and Miss Ashley West. So we congratulate them. It's the pinnacle of certification nationally for teachers. So congratulations to them and all the 27 new teachers we have in the district. Also want to congratulate Reed High School and Reno High School for their We the People Finals performance in Washington, D.C. Both won division awards, and so we're very, very proud of them. And we had both the teams from Nevada. We had the first place team and then also a wild card as well, too. So very, very proud of them. I represented the board at the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Governing Board meeting, which is a body that I serve on behalf of this board. I participated in some super secret activities ahead of National Educator Week. That's May 8th, so everybody get ready for that. And I was also a part of this surprise assembly in recognition of Swope Middle School Principal Mike Nakashima. He was named Principal of the Year by Junior Achievement, and so we are incredibly proud of him. The school had a regularly planned assembly, and he had no idea when we all came walking through the door. So that was a whole lot of fun, and we're incredibly proud of him, and he'll be honored at a gala in early May. I met with several parent groups, and then also had 2 school visits with Principal Kitchen. I visited North Star Online School, and then Bernice Matthews Elementary School, where I thanked Principal April Koldani for her many years of service. She is retiring, and Assistant Principal Adam Schlatter is actually moving up to the principal role, and then there will be a soon-to-be new Assistant Principal, Chris Kahn. So very excited for them, so a very busy couple weeks. Thank you. All right, so that ends item 5.02, and now we'll go to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Smith. I will carry on the theme of celebration and just congratulate Ivy again and all of our soon-to-be class of 2023 graduates who are busy preparing what your next step is, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year, military, the workforce. We are so proud of you, and we can't wait to celebrate you as you walk across the stage in what will just be a matter of weeks. I also want to congratulate Jordan Gotchi from Sky Ranch Middle School for receiving the Nevada ACDA New Choral Music Educator of the Year Award at the All-State Honor Choir event held on Friday, April 21st. So congratulations, Jordan. We're very grateful for you. And then on a less celebratory note, I want to just let the trustees know that we are committed to obviously the well-being of our students and our staff. And so we have been fortunate to have a partnership at no cost to us with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, who has helped us develop a survey to give to all staff about what can the district do to enhance their well-being and their work satisfaction, because we know those things are critically important. I sent out a message yesterday that we would launch the survey link yesterday, and we did, and then heard from a number of staff across the district that they had concerns about how some of the questions in the survey were framed, and that it felt like more of a culture and climate survey rather than really seeking how it is you feel about your workplace and what you believe the district can do to better support you. So I'm grateful that our colleagues at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and our team here quickly rallied. We took the link down. We had good conversations today, and we will be relaunching the revised survey that addresses the concerns of staff on Monday. And I sent a video message out to all of our staff today because, as I said, I promise that when we get it wrong, we will acknowledge it and we will make it right. So we got it wrong this time, but we're making it right. And so I just want to thank everybody for their grace and understanding, and for the staff who rallied to solve a problem.
Thank you. Thank you for modeling that as well. All right, so that closes item 5.03 and section 5 in its entirety, and now we'll move on to section 6, and we will welcome the members of our public for item 6.01 for public comment.
Joshua Cole.
Hi, Mr. Cole, welcome.
Hi there.
Hi.
Do I press the button to start?
No, you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. So I appreciate the prior discussion about school safety and special education, as my concern touches on both. I'm here today because of some very serious concerns I have about student safety. My son is a student at Jesse Beck Elementary School. Over the course of the school year, his class has had to be evacuated repeatedly because a single child grew increasingly violent over the school year. Despite numerous incidents, this child was not offered additional services to address their behavioral issues and not offered a more appropriate learning environment. Instead, as their behavioral issues grew more violent, the only solution was to evacuate the class to protect the other children. What has infuriated the parents is that at no point were we notified about these events occurring. I have attempted to determine how many times the class was evacuated with little effort. With little results. The school principal, Ms. Lane, has offered no additional insight. When I attempted to use a Freedom of Information Act request to determine the number of evacuations, Washoe County School District General Counsel, thank you for your prompt response, I have to say, I appreciate that, promptly let me know there were no records related to the number of times my son's class was evacuated. This has angered me even more to know that there seems to be no way for me to figure out how many times my son's class was evacuated. There are so many failures in this situation that I cannot possibly fight them all. The one clear thing that I am asking from you is I would like to see a district-wide policy that if a class has to be evacuated for safety reasons, the parents be notified. You can structure that however you want so it respects the child with an IEP that has special protections, but you have to notify the parents. So I am asking this group one last time, can someone please tell me how many times my son's class was evacuated to keep him safe from student violence? And your answer says it all. Thank you.
As a point of clarification, we don't actually respond to public comment, but I'm very appreciative of your comment, Mr. Cole. Thank you, and I know we've emailed as well. Thank you so much.
Sandy Tibbet.
Hi, Ms. Tibbet. Welcome.
All right, Sandy Tibbet for the record. So I pushed some buttons at the last meeting by exceeding my allotted 3 minutes. And it was an educational and entertaining to see this board triggered and fleeing from the room in fear. Priceless. It was as if I had pulled a weapon and I was going to cause violent bodily harm. I get it. Words are powerful and those threatening truth bombs hurt. Some words of advice. It wasn't a good look for the board to leave the room. You lose credibility when you can't practice what you preach. A word that comes to mind is hypocrisy. 5 minutes and 14 seconds. Per this board's agenda, each board member is allotted 3 minutes for their board reports. Vice President Nicolette was afforded 5 minutes and 14 seconds during the last board meeting. The very same board meeting, I was removed because I wanted to finish the last 2 sentences of my comments. That would have taken me less than 20 seconds to finish. The disruption to the meeting was caused by a triggered president losing control. Another word to come to mind is entitled. Rules for thee, but not for me, right? The board recognizes restorative practices as a failure, evidenced by the excuses they keep feeding us. The first excuse is blame the fake pandemic. Second excuse, staff did not get the proper training. During a recent interview, both Trustee Mayberry and Trustee Rodriguez used the excuse of their hands being tied by Nevada statutes. And this is why they are unable to properly protect our students and teachers. The last time I checked, the Nevada statutes apply to all the counties in the state of Nevada, so why is Lyon County School District able to return to the zero tolerance policy? It's because they have a common sense superintendent who is a real leader and doesn't carry a woke agenda. And they also have a constitutional sheriff, and both want to protect the citizens of their communities. They are doing right by their constituents and upholding their oaths of office. I am beginning to think the citizens of Washoe County should consider moving their families to Lyon County and enrolling their kids into the Lyon County School District, where they will protect all students and not virtue signal with words like racism, anti-Semitism, and homophobia. Projecting and virtue signaling is a dangerous, slippery slope. I yield back my time, President Smith. I call us even.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tibbet. Have a lovely evening.
Darla Lee.
Hi, Miss Lee. Welcome. Thanks for being with us tonight, or this late afternoon.
Yeah, it's a very long day after being at the commissioner meeting. However, I wanted to be here because, if you could pass those to the trustees, I have an article here from the end of March, and it regards the Fredericksburg, Virginia County Public Schools that removed 14 books that contains sexually explicit content and themes that were inappropriate for young people. Now, I don't know whether any of these books and the additional ones that I've listed on the second page are in our school libraries, but I would hope that somebody would check it out, because these are highly inappropriate and offensive books, and they are not for young people to be exposed to. So that's the first thing. I would really appreciate if you would take time to absolutely go through this, and then somehow be able to communicate to the librarians and see if they are in our libraries. My other comment would be in regards to Hug High, of which I am a resident for the HOA directly across the street from Hug High, and we are still experiencing the students that are apparently don't have classes at 10 o'clock. They are definitely wandering our streets on the lunch hour. And we do have students in the HOA, so that's fine. But they mostly are the ones I recognize and would know. But these other students, and there have been occasions where students would come over to our HOA and use our streets for gang. That's all I can say. They're students of 20 or more kids that are congregating and roughhousing in our streets, which we greatly do not appreciate. We were told when that school was being built and all of the plans leading up to it that it was going to be a closed campus. It is anything but. It is a very open campus. Kids wander around all hours of the school day. I'm not sure whether they just don't have classes that time or what, but it is definitely not appreciated. My last question would be, I understand the COVID-19 vaccine is going to be made mandatory for students this fall. I would like a confirmation of that for Washoe County. No? Good. I would appreciate that not happening. And if it is mandatory anywhere, that would be
Thank you so much.
tragic.
And thank you for being with us.
John Eppolito.
Hi, Mr. Eppolito. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is John Eppolito. I'm with Protect Nevada Children. That father who just spoke at the very beginning, he sat over there for 4 hours waiting to tell you guys how unsafe his kid's school is. Most of you had no idea. Rombardo gives the same answer that he gives me. There's no public record of that. It wouldn't be that hard to find out. That's BS. You guys should deal with that father and the other kids' parents that are in that classroom. You have a dangerous student in that situation, threatening the safety of the other students.
Same as I asked for how much money is spent on, well, at the last meeting, you guys voted 7-0 to spend another $6.5 million on software for curriculum associates. Since then, I've sent 2 emails asking how much total do you guys spend on software for these kids. I haven't got the BS answer from Lombardo yet that there's no public records request, but we know there's 70 people in the IT department. Somebody must know how much money you spend. If not, you should. What do you call the guy that just, Matthews, I think his name is. It wouldn't be hard to find out. And we know that the free vendors, we know how they're paid. They're paid with student data. It sometimes seems like you guys have given up trying to educate the kids. Stick them in front of the screens. And another thing, to answer the superintendent's question back when we met several months ago, maybe a low-tech school would be the answer, especially down by Poliquitas, for parents who don't want their kids in front of the screen for 3 or 4 hours a day just for school. Maybe we could have a magnet school, a low-tech school in the district, the kind of school where Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these other dot-com executives would send their kids. That would be something to think about. It came up a long time ago with a different board president. I think you guys, I don't know if you'd be surprised or not, because I know most of you haven't been in the classroom. Most teachers over 35 or 40 realize that screens are a joke. I do, my wife does, most of the older teachers I talk to, yet you keep spending money, energy, effort, and I know it's hard to get teachers, and I know the teachers, they got so much going on, they're underpaid, they're overworked, they won't speak up, which is exactly what happened at Incline High when the one-to-one program came in, because the boosters wanted it. The teachers didn't want it. The teachers weren't even asked if they wanted it. They just brought in the devices and said, here you go. But the teachers wouldn't speak up. And one of the older teachers told me it's because it's easy to put the kids in front of the screen. I only have 8 seconds left. John Eppolito, you can find 1,500 of us on Facebook at Protect Nevada Children.
Thank you, Mr. Eppolito. Have a nice rest of your evening.
Kaylin Evans.
Hi, Mr. Evans. Welcome.
Hi, for the record, my name's Kaylin Evans. I'm the president of the Washoe Education Association. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys today. I just wanted to update you on some of the work that we've been doing on the record at the legislature. And I won't go into specifics on bills. This is like my little cheat sheet. There's actually 145 education bills that we were tracking in some to some degree, right? And obviously we have many of the same priorities of this school board. But I also just wanted to kind of really highlight the work that educators in your district are doing. By the end of the session, we'll have brought up nearly 100 different educators in some capacity up to Carson. Everything from directly lobbying with lawmakers, testifying in support or opposition, and general public comment. We've had weekly groups. I had a couple of days off because it was a deadline, so that was nice to have a little bit of time. But prior, we've had weekly groups up there. We even had groups come up during their spring break. We had a group the first week and the second week that are giving up their time. What I will say is that they are making you guys, you would be very proud to see them. They are extremely polished. They are articulate. They are passionate. They are representing the Washoe County School District to the highest degree. And the word in that building and the discussions that I'm having with lawmakers is that our folks are doing a really good job representing the school district. There is nobody giving up on kids in this district. The work that these educators are doing, working all day. We've got a group coming tomorrow for a bill hearing at 6 p.m. They will not get back till close to 10. We'll be up there, another group at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, so I'll have a fun 7 to 11 day tomorrow at the ledge. It's because of how important this work is doing. I just wanted to be on the record to make sure that everybody understands how much work we are putting in to address all of the issues that we're dealing with. We all know around funding, around student behavior supports, around teacher pipeline and retention, all of these critical issues that we're dealing with. I mean, we're doing everything we can. I did want to be on the record to formally invite all of you as individual citizens. We've got a big rally coming up. JJ, sorry, I forgot to give these to you. It's on May 17th. It is going to be in front of the legislative building. The focus is on the rainy day fund. I know I don't have much time, but basically there's a significant amount of money. They're looking to increase that rainy day fund. We think a full rainy day fund account is enough. That extra surplus revenue should be appropriated now to address the issues that we're falling in. There's some discussions around those specific pieces, but would love to see you all individually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans.
The board received emails from Paul Sumby, Rachel Stepina, and Abigail Began.
Thank you very much. All right, that closes item 6.12, and I'd like to announce that our next meeting is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023, and that brings us to adjournment at 6:01 p.m. Thank you all so much.